Welcome, we're so happy you tuned in tonight. Before we get started, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. Now, let's get comfortable and drift into deep, peaceful sleep together. Tides are the regular rising and falling of sea level along coasts, a rhythm that unfolds twice each day in many places around the world. If you've ever stood on a beach and watched the water creep higher up the sand, or noticed tide pools appearing as the ocean pulls back, you've witnessed this ancient pattern. Tides happen because gravity gently pulls on Earth's oceans, creating bulges of water that move around the planet as it spins. The process is slow, patient, and remarkably predictable, like a clock made of water and moonlight. There's something deeply calming about tides once you understand them. They represent forces so vast they move entire oceans, yet they do it with such regularity that people have been predicting them accurately for centuries. The moon is the strongest everyday tidal influence on Earth. Even though the sun is much larger, the moon is so much closer that its gravitational pull dominates the tidal story. When we talk about what causes tides, we're really talking about the moon's gravity reaching across space and tugging on the ocean's surface. But the sun also affects tides, even though it is much farther away. The sun's contribution is real and measurable, adding a secondary rhythm that weaves through the moon's primary pattern. Together, these two celestial bodies create a gentle gravitational dance that the oceans follow, rising and falling in response to forces that travel silently through the vacuum of space. It's important to understand that tides are not just waves. This is a common confusion, but the distinction matters. Waves are surface ripples caused by wind pushing on the water, creating motion that travels across the ocean's surface. You can watch a wave approach the shore, break, and dissipate within seconds. Tides, by contrast, are long, slow changes in water level that affect the entire body of water. A tide doesn't crash on the beach. It arrives gradually, almost imperceptibly, raising or lowering the sea level over the course of hours. If you sit on a beach and watch for just a few minutes, you might not notice the tide moving at all. But come back after an hour and the change becomes obvious. The waterline has shifted, sometimes by just a few inches, sometimes by many feet, depending on where you are. Many shorelines experience 2 high tides and 2 low tides each day. This pattern, called a semidiurnal tide, is the most common tidal rhythm on Earth. In places with this pattern, the ocean rises to a high point, then falls to a low point, then rises again to another high point, then falls again to another low point, all within roughly 25 hours. The timing of tides follows the moon's position more than the clock on the wall, which means high tide doesn't happen at the same time every day. Instead, it shifts later by about 50 minutes each day, tracking the moon as it orbits Earth. This creates a kind of lunar schedule that coastal communities learn to read, checking tide tables, rather than ordinary clocks when planning activities near the water. Tides move huge amounts of water, but they do it slowly and patiently. In some places, billions of tons of seawater shift position over the course of 6 hours, flowing into bays and estuaries, then flowing back out again. Yet despite the enormous scale of this movement, it happens smoothly and steadily. There's no sudden rush, no dramatic surge, just a gradual transformation of the shoreline. Tide patterns can feel like the ocean is breathing in and out, a slow respiration that makes the sea feel alive in a gentle way. The water rises like an inhale, reaches its peak, then retreats like an exhale, over and over, day after day, year after year. Even when tides are powerful, they usually arrive with calm predictability. Unlike storms or tsunamis, which bring chaos and uncertainty, tides follow rules. Scientists can calculate when high tide will occur months or even years in advance, down to the minute. This reliability makes tides feel safe and orderly, part of nature's dependable rhythms rather than its wild extremes. There's comfort in knowing that the ocean, despite its vastness and power, follows a schedule you can print on a chart and carry in your pocket. Now that tides feel familiar, we can drift into the moon's gentle tug and how it shapes the ocean's slow rhythm. The moon's gravity pulls more strongly on the side of Earth that faces the moon. Gravity gets weaker with distance, so the water on the near side of Earth experiences a slightly stronger pull than the solid Earth beneath it, and the solid Earth experiences a slightly stronger pull than the water on the far side. These differences in gravitational strength are called tidal forces, and though they're small compared to Earth's own gravity, they're enough to deform the ocean's surface. That stronger pull helps create a bulge of ocean water on the near side. Imagine Earth as a sphere with water coating its surface. The moon's gravity reaches down and gently lifts the water on the side facing the moon, creating a subtle dome or bulge. The water doesn't fly off into space, Earth's gravity is far too strong for that, but it does rise a bit higher than it would without the moon's influence. This bulge is spread across thousands of miles of ocean, so it's not like a mountain of water, it's more like a very gentle, broad swelling that raises sea level by a few feet over a vast area. A second bulge forms on the far side because Earth and the ocean system also lean away slightly as they orbit. This is the part that surprises people. You might expect a bulge on the side nearest the moon, but why one on the opposite side? The answer involves thinking about how Earth and the moon orbit each other. They don't actually orbit around the moon, both orbit around a common centre of mass, a point that's inside Earth but not at Earth's centre. As Earth revolves around this point, the far side of Earth experiences a kind of centrifugal effect, an outward directed tendency that slightly counteracts the moon's gravitational pull. The result is that water on the far side also bulges outward, creating a second tidal bulge opposite the first. As Earth rotates, coastlines move through these bulges. Earth spins on its axis once every 24 hours, carrying continents and oceans around with it. As a particular coastline rotates into the area where a tidal bulge exists, the water level at that coast rises. This is high tide. When a coastline passes through a bulge, it experiences a high tide. The water is literally higher there, lifted by the combined effect of the moon's gravity and Earth's motion. When it passes through a lower area between bulges, it experiences a low tide. Between the two bulges are regions where the water level is lower than average, creating low tides. This is why many places get 2 high tides and 2 low tides each day. As Earth completes one rotation, a given coastline passes through both bulges and both low areas, experiencing 2 cycles of rise and fall. Picture Earth spinning inside a football-shaped envelope of water, with the 2 ends of the football pointing toward and away from the moon. As your beach rotates through the ends of the football, you experience high tides. As it rotates through the flatter sides, you experience low tides. A tidal day is slightly longer than a regular day because the moon moves in its orbit. While Earth spins, the moon is also travelling along its orbit around Earth, moving roughly 13 degrees per day. This means that by the time Earth completes one full rotation, the moon has moved a bit farther along, and Earth has to rotate a little more to catch up. As a result, the tidal cycle takes about 24 hours and 50 minutes instead of exactly 24 hours. That's why tides shift a bit later each day. If high tide is at noon today, it will be around 50 minutes past noon tomorrow, then around 1:40 the day after that, and so on. Over the course of a month, the tidal schedule cycles through all hours of the day. The moon's pull is gentle, but it acts on the entire ocean, which makes the effect noticeable. Individually, the tidal force on any single water molecule is tiny, far too small to feel. But when you add up the effect across millions of square miles of ocean, those tiny forces create bulges hundreds or even thousands of miles wide. The ocean responds as a whole, with water flowing from low tide regions toward high tide regions, slowly and steadily redistributing itself around the planet. With the moon's rhythm settled in, let's add the sun's softer influence, like a second hand joining the same slow dance. The sun's gravity also creates tides called solar tides. The sun is massive, far more massive than the moon, but it's also much farther away. The strength of tidal forces depends not just on mass but on distance, and specifically on how quickly gravity weakens with distance. Because the sun is about 400 times farther from Earth than the moon, its tidal effect is much weaker, roughly half the strength of the moon's tidal pull. Solar tides are usually smaller than lunar tides because the sun is much farther away, but they're still significant enough to matter. When the sun and moon line up, their tidal effects combine. This happens twice each month. At new moon, when the moon is between Earth and the sun, and at full moon, when Earth is between the moon and the sun. During these alignments, the solar bulges and lunar bulges overlap, reinforcing each other. This creates higher highs and lower lows called spring tides. At spring tide, the difference between high tide and low tide, called the tidal range, is at its maximum. If a beach normally sees a 3-foot difference between high and low tide, it might see a 5-foot difference during spring tides. Spring tides happen near new moons and full moons. The word spring here means to spring up, not the season. People sometimes assume spring tides only happen in springtime, but the term actually refers to the water springing up higher than usual. Spring tides occur roughly every 2 weeks, aligned with the lunar cycle. When the sun and moon form a right angle with Earth, their effects partially cancel. This happens at the first and third quarter moons, when the moon appears half illuminated from Earth. During these quarter moon phases, the sun's tidal pull is trying to create bulges in one direction, while the moon's pull creates bulges in a different direction. The result is that the bulges partially cancel each other out. This creates smaller tidal ranges called neap tides. During neap tides, the difference between high and low tide is at its minimum. That same beach that sees a 3-foot range on average might see only a 1-foot range during neap tides. Neap tides happen near the first and third quarter moons, also about every 2 weeks, alternating with spring tides. The sun's contribution adds a gentle monthly pulse to the ocean's schedule. If you track the tides over a month, you'll see the range grow and shrink in a regular pattern. Larger during new and full moons, smaller during quarter moons, then larger again, then smaller again, in an endless cycle. Now that we've met the main gravity players, we can explore why tides feel different from place to place, like the same song played in different rooms. Tides are not the same height everywhere on Earth. If the ocean were simply a smooth layer of water covering a perfect sphere, and if Earth didn't rotate, tides would be relatively uniform. But Earth is complex. Continents block the flow of water, ocean basins have different shapes and depths, and Earth's rotation adds complications. All of these factors mean that tidal patterns vary dramatically from one coastline to another. The shape of coastlines can make tides bigger or smaller. A straight, open coastline facing deep, ocean might experience moderate tides that closely match the theoretical predictions. But a coastline with complex geography, bays, inlets, peninsulas, islands, can see tides that are amplified or dampened by the local shape of the land. The depth of the water also affects how tides move. Tidal bulges travel across the ocean as extremely long waves, with wavelengths measured in hundreds or thousands of miles. When these tidal waves encounter shallow water, they slow down and grow taller, just like wind-driven waves do when they approach a beach. Narrow bays can amplify tides by funneling water inward. Imagine a bay shaped like a funnel, wide at the ocean entrance and narrow at the inland end. As the tidal bulge pushes water into the wide mouth of the bay, that water has to flow toward the narrow end. Because the same volume of water is being squeezed into a smaller area, the water level rises higher. This is why some of the world's largest tidal ranges occur in funnel-shaped bays. The Bay of Fundy between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia in Canada is famous for having the highest tides in the world, with ranges exceeding 50 feet during spring tides. The bay's shape acts like a natural amplifier for the tidal signal. Some places have very large tidal ranges because of local geography. In addition to funnel-shaped bays, other geographical features can create extreme tides. Long, narrow channels can produce similar effects. Shallow continental shelves can cause tidal waves to build up. Even the orientation of a coastline relative to the path of the tidal bulge can matter. All of these factors combine to create the local tidal character of a place. In contrast, some coastlines experience smaller, quieter tidal changes. Islands in the middle of deep ocean, far from continental shelves, often have very small tidal ranges, sometimes just a foot or two. The water can rise and fall freely in all directions, so there's less amplification. The timing of tides can differ greatly between nearby locations. Two towns on opposite sides of the same bay might experience high tide hours apart because of the way tidal currents flow through the bay. The shape of the seafloor, the presence of islands or headlands, and the width of channels all influence when the tidal wave arrives at different locations. This is why tide tables are always specific to a particular place. The predictions for one harbour won't accurately describe the tides even a few miles away. Ocean basins can slosh in patterns like water in a bathtub. This phenomenon is called tidal resonance. Every body of water has a natural sloshing frequency determined by its size and depth. If you've ever carried a basin of water and noticed how the water sloshes back and forth at a particular rhythm, you've experienced this. Ocean basins do the same thing, but on a much larger scale and much more slowly. If the tidal forcing from the moon and sun happens to match the natural sloshing frequency of a basin, resonance occurs and the tides are amplified dramatically. These patterns are influenced by the size of the basin and Earth's rotation. Earth's rotation adds another complication through something called the Coriolis effect, which causes moving water to curve to the right in the northern hemisphere and to the left in the southern hemisphere. This creates rotating tidal patterns in some ocean basins, where the tidal bulge moves around the basin in a circular fashion rather than simply sloshing back and forth. Local tide behaviour is a blend of celestial pulls and earthly shapes. The moon and sun provide the forcing, the fundamental rhythm that drives the tides. But the actual height and timing of tides at any particular beach depends on how that forcing interacts with the specific geography of that location. It's like how a musical note sounds different when played on different instruments. The fundamental frequency is the same, but the character of the sound changes based on the shape and material of the instrument. With those local differences in mind, let's drift into the calm tools humans use to predict tides, because predictability is part of what makes tides soothing. Tide tables are schedules that predict high and low tides for specific places. These tables list the times and heights of high and low tides for each day of the year, allowing people to plan activities around the tide. A tide table might show that on June 15th, high tide will occur at 6:30 in the morning at a height of 8.3 feet, followed by low tide at 12:45 in the afternoon at a height of 1.1 feet. Tide predictions are based on lunar and solar cycles plus local measurements. Scientists use mathematical models that incorporate the positions of the moon and sun, the tidal forces they create, and how those forces have historically affected water levels at a specific location. The fundamental patterns are well understood. We know exactly when the moon will be full, when it will be new, when it will be closest to Earth in its orbit. These astronomical patterns are completely predictable. The challenge is translating those celestial motions into accurate predictions for a specific coastline. Because coastlines differ, tide tables must be location-specific. A tide table for Boston won't help you if you're in Seattle, because the two locations experience completely different tidal patterns. Boston has semi-diurnal tides with a moderate range, while Seattle has mixed tides with a larger range and more complex timing. Even locations relatively close together need separate tide tables. The predictions are created by analysing years or even decades of tidal observations at a location, identifying the patterns and using those patterns to predict future tides. Many harbours and ports rely on tide predictions for safe navigation. Large ships have limited clearance beneath their hulls, and they need to know when the water will be deep enough to enter a harbour safely. In some ports, ships can only enter or leave during high tide when there's enough water over shallow bars or channels. Tide predictions allow captains to time their arrivals and departures accordingly, avoiding the risk of running aground. Fishermen often use tide knowledge because tides affect marine life movement. Many fish species move with the tides, following tidal currents into estuaries to feed or riding outgoing tides back to deeper water. Experienced fishermen learn to time their fishing to coincide with these movements, knowing that certain species are more likely to be active during particular phases of the tide. Tide predictions can be very accurate when based on long-term local data. In well-studied locations with decades of tidal records, predictions can be accurate to within a few minutes and a few inches. The main sources of error are unusual weather conditions. Strong winds can push water toward or away from shore temporarily, raising or lowering sea level, and variations in atmospheric pressure, which also affects sea level. But under normal conditions, tide tables are remarkably reliable. This accuracy is possible because tides are fundamentally deterministic. The motions of the moon and sun are governed by Newton's laws of motion and gravity, which are extremely precise. There's no randomness, no chaos, just predictable orbits and predictable forces. Some places also track tidal currents, not just tidal height. A tidal current is the horizontal flow of water caused by tides moving in and out. When the tide rises, water flows horizontally toward the coast and into bays. This is called a flood current. When the tide falls, water flows horizontally back toward the ocean. This is called an ebb current. Between flood and ebb, there are periods called slack water when the current is minimal. Currents can be strong in channels and narrow passages. In places like the Golden Gate in San Francisco or the Strait, between Vancouver Island and the mainland, tidal currents can reach several knots, fast enough to affect boats and create visible turbulence in the water. Knowing the tide can make the coastline feel like a place with a gentle routine. Instead of seeing the ocean as chaotic or unpredictable, you begin to see it as something that follows a schedule, something you can learn to read. Coastal communities develop an intuitive sense of the tide, knowing without looking at a table roughly when high tide will occur, or whether the tide is currently rising or falling. This knowledge creates a sense of connection to the natural cycles, a feeling of living in tune with forces much larger than yourself. Now we'll explore what tides do in nature, how they shape shores, and create quiet habitats that change with each rise and fall. Tides help move sand and sediment along coasts. As water rises and falls, it carries sand with it. The flood current picks up sediment and carries it inland. The ebb current picks up sediment and carries it seaward. Over time, this back and forth movement can transport large amounts of sand along the coast. They contribute to the forming and shifting of tidal flats, broad areas of sand or mud that are covered at high tide and exposed at low tide. Tidal flats are dynamic environments, constantly being reshaped by the movement of water and sediment. Intertidal zones are areas that are sometimes underwater and sometimes exposed. These zones exist wherever tides rise and fall, creating a strip of shoreline that experiences both marine and terrestrial conditions. The intertidal zone can be divided into subzones based on how often they're submerged. The high intertidal zone is only covered during the highest tides and is exposed most of the time. The mid-intertidal zone is covered and exposed roughly equally. The low intertidal zone is exposed only during the lowest tides and is underwater most of the time. Many animals are adapted to the intertidal rhythm. Life in the intertidal zone is challenging because organisms must cope with being underwater part of the time and exposed to air the rest of the time. When the tide is in, they face marine challenges: waves, currents, predators like fish and crabs. When the tide is out, they face terrestrial challenges: desiccation, temperature extremes, predators like birds. Animals like barnacles have evolved to seal themselves inside their shells when the tide is out, protecting themselves from drying out. Mussels cluster together to retain moisture. Sea stars and anemones often shelter in crevices or under rocks during low tide. Tide pools can form when water is trapped in rocky areas during low tide. As the tide recedes, depressions in the rock hold seawater, creating small pools that persist until the next high tide. Tide pools become tiny habitats with their own small ecosystems. A single tide pool might contain algae, sea anemones, small fish, sea urchins, crabs, and various mollusks, all coexisting in a space no larger than a bathtub. These pools are accessible to humans during low tide, offering a window into the underwater world without the need for diving equipment. Children and adults alike are drawn to tide pools, peering into the clear water to watch hermit crabs scuttle across the bottom or sea anemones wave their tentacles. Some shorebirds feed in intertidal zones when the tide exposes food. Species like sandpipers, plovers, and curlews use their long bills to probe the sand and mud for worms, clams, and other invertebrates that live buried in the sediment. These prey items are only accessible during low tide when the sediment is exposed. As a result, shorebirds often feed in sync with the tides, gathering on mud flats at low tide to feast, then resting or moving elsewhere during high tide. Many plants in coastal marshes are adapted to regular saltwater flooding. Salt marshes exist in the upper reaches of the intertidal zone, areas that are flooded during high tides but exposed during low tides. The plants that live here, like cordgrass and pickleweed, can tolerate salt water and can survive being submerged for hours at a time. These marshes are incredibly productive ecosystems, serving as nurseries for fish and shellfish, and as feeding grounds for birds. Over long periods, tides can help shape estuaries where rivers meet the sea. An estuary is a partially enclosed body of water where fresh water from a river mixes with salt water from the ocean. Tides push salt water upstream into estuaries during flood tides and allow fresh water to push downstream during ebb tides. This creates a complex mixing zone where salinity varies with the tide, creating unique habitats. The shoreline is always gently being redrawn, like a soft sketch that changes daily. If you visit the same beach every day, you'll notice subtle changes. A sandbar that appeared overnight, a patch of seaweed deposited by the high tide, the exposure of rocks that were submerged yesterday. These changes are the visible signature of the tides at work, endlessly reshaping the boundary between land and sea. As the coast quietly shifts, we can float deeper into the idea of tidal currents, moving water that feels like the ocean's slow, steady circulation. Tidal currents happen because water flows toward high tide areas and away during low tide. Water seeks its own level, so when a tidal bulge creates higher sea level in one area, water flows horizontally toward that area from surrounding regions where sea level is lower. In bays, tidal currents bring water in on the rising tide and carry it out on the falling tide. If you watch the surface of the water in a bay or estuary during the tidal cycle, you might see the current change direction. For several hours, the current flows inward as the tide rises. Then, around high tide, the current slows and stops. This is slack water. Then the current reverses and flows outward as the tide falls. In narrow channels, these currents can become especially strong. When a large volume of water needs to flow through a constricted passage, the current accelerates. It's similar to how a river flows faster through a narrow gorge than across a wide plain. Some regions experience tidal races, where currents move quickly through tight spaces. In places like the Gulf of Corryvreckan between Scottish Islands or the Saltstraumen Strait in Norway, tidal currents can reach 10 knots or more, creating whirlpools and standing waves. These tidal races are dramatic and powerful, a reminder that the gentle rise and fall of tides is connected to significant movement of water. Currents help mix nutrients in coastal waters. When tidal currents flow over the seafloor, they stir up sediments and bring nutrients from the bottom toward the surface. This mixing can support plankton growth, which supports larger food webs. Phytoplankton are microscopic plants that form the base of the marine food web, and they need nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus to grow. In areas with strong tidal mixing, these nutrients are continually replenished, supporting abundant plankton populations. Tides also influence the movement of sediments and tiny organisms. Larvae of many marine animals drift with tidal currents, using the tides as a transportation system. Some larvae time their release to coincide with specific tidal phases, ensuring they'll be carried to suitable habitats. Some animals time their activity with tidal currents for easier travel. Eels migrating to the sea may time their downstream journey with ebb tides, letting the current carry them along. Fish entering estuaries to spawn might ride flood currents upstream, conserving energy. The water's movement is often quiet and steady even when it's powerful. Unless currents are moving through very shallow or constricted areas, you might not see much surface turbulence. The current flows beneath the surface, invisible but tangible if you wade into the water or drop an object that floats. You can think of tidal currents as invisible rivers that reverse direction on a schedule, rivers that flow through the ocean rather than over land, rivers that are created by the pull of the moon rather than by rainfall and gravity. Now we'll step back and look at the even longer view, how tides connect to the moon's orbit and the slow changes happening over millions of years. The moon is slowly moving away from Earth over time. Currently, the moon recedes from Earth at a rate of about 3.8 centimeters per year, roughly the rate at which your fingernails grow. This happens because tidal interactions transfer energy in subtle ways. The process involves something called tidal friction. As Earth rotates beneath the tidal bulges, friction between the moving water and the seafloor gradually slows Earth's rotation. That rotational energy doesn't disappear. It's transferred to the moon, increasing the moon's orbital energy and causing it to spiral very slowly outward. Earth's rotation is also slowing very gradually because of tidal friction. The length of a day is increasing by about 2 milliseconds per century. That means days become slightly longer over extremely long periods. 100 million years from now, a day will be about half an hour longer than it is today. In the distant past, tides and day length were different than today. When the moon first formed, roughly 4.5 billion years ago, it was much closer to Earth, perhaps only 15,000 miles away compared to the current distance of about 240,000 miles. At that distance, the moon's gravitational pull was enormously stronger, and tides were correspondingly enormous, perhaps hundreds of feet high. Earth's rotation was also faster. A day might have been only 5 or 6 hours long. Ancient tidal patterns can sometimes be studied through layered sediments. In certain tidal environments, sediments are deposited in daily layers, with each layer representing a single tide. By counting these layers in ancient rocks, geologists can estimate how many tides occurred per day in the distant past, which tells them about the length of the day and the distance to the moon at that time. Tidal friction gently turns motion into heat in the oceans and Earth's crust. As water sloshes back and forth with the tides, friction generates heat, warming the water and the rocks beneath. The amount of heat generated is tiny compared to other heat sources, but over billions of years it adds up to a significant amount of energy dissipation. These changes are slow and not noticeable in daily life. You won't feel days getting longer or see the moon visibly receding. These are processes that unfold over geological time, imperceptible to human senses but real and measurable through careful scientific observation. The tide's rhythm connects nightly shorelines to deep time history. When you watch the tide come in this evening, you're witnessing the same process that has shaped Earth's rotation and the moon's orbit for billions of years. The gentle rise and fall of water on the beach is connected to the gradual evolution of the Earth-Moon system, a reminder that even the quietest processes can have profound effects if given enough time. It can feel comforting that the ocean keeps time in a steady way, even across ages. In a world of change and uncertainty, tides represent constancy. They've been rising and falling since before there were animals to witness them, and they'll continue rising and falling long after we're gone. There's a kind of peace in that perspective, a sense of being part of something much larger and older than individual human concerns. With deep time softly in the background, we can return to the present shoreline and the bedtime feeling, tides as a steady companion, not a force to fear. Many coastal communities plan activities around the tide. In places where tides are, significant daily life naturally synchronizes with the tidal cycle. Fishing boats depart and return with the tide. Markets selling fresh seafood might open around the times when fishing boats come in, which depends on the tide. Beach access might be easier at low tide when there's more exposed sand. Some beaches are wider at low tide and narrower at high tide. If you want to walk along a particular beach, you might check the tide table first to ensure there will be enough dry sand. In some locations, entire beaches disappear at high tide, with waves reaching all the way to the base of cliffs or seawalls. Tide timing can shape when people explore tide pools safely. Tide pooling is safest during low tide, especially during very low spring tides, when the maximum area of intertidal zone is exposed. During these times, tide pools that are usually submerged become accessible, revealing creatures that are otherwise hidden underwater. Timing your visit to coincide with a low tide can make the difference between seeing a few common animals and discovering a rich community of unusual species. Surfers sometimes pay attention to tides because tide height affects waves in certain spots. Waves break differently, depending on how much water is over a reef or sandbar. At high tide, a particular surf break might produce small, mushy waves. At low tide, the same break might produce larger, hollower waves that are better for surfing. Experienced surfers learn the tidal characteristics of their favourite spots, knowing which tides produce the best conditions. Sailors often consider tides for docking and passing shallow areas. A sailboat with a deep keel might be unable to enter a harbour at low tide but can do so easily at high tide. Sailors also use tidal currents to their advantage, timing their passages through channels to coincide with favourable currents that will push them in the direction they want to go. Some fish move closer to shore on certain tides. Many species follow the tide in and out, feeding in shallow waters during high tide and retreating to deeper water during low tide. Anglers who understand these patterns can position themselves accordingly, fishing in different locations at different tidal stages to target specific species. Crabs and other intertidal animals may hide or forage depending on water level. When the tide is in, crabs can move freely, searching for food and avoiding predators. When the tide is out, many crabs burrow into the sand or hide under rocks to avoid desiccation and terrestrial predators like gulls. Kelp forests can be influenced by currents that tides help create. Kelp is a large seaweed that grows in underwater forests in cool, nutrient-rich coastal waters. Tidal currents bring nutrients to the kelp and remove waste products, helping the kelp thrive. The back and forth flow of tidal currents also helps distribute kelp spores, allowing the forest to spread. In estuaries, tides mix saltwater and freshwater in a gentle back and forth. The incoming tide pushes a wedge of saltwater upstream, while the outgoing tide allows freshwater to push the saltwater back downstream. This creates a zone where salinity gradually changes from fresh to salt, and this zone moves up and down the estuary with the tide. Different organisms thrive at different salinity levels, so the estuary supports a diverse array of species. The tide schedule becomes part of the quiet routine of life near the sea. People who live near the coast often develop an intuitive awareness of the tide, glancing at the water and knowing without thinking whether it's rising or falling, whether it's near high or low. This awareness becomes woven into daily life, as natural as knowing whether it's morning or afternoon. To finish, we'll let the ocean's breathing return to your own breathing. slow, steady, and safe. Tides remind us that big movements can still be slow and predictable. The ocean is vast, containing more water than all the lakes and rivers on Earth combined, yet it rises and falls with a regularity that can be charted on a calendar. The forces that move it, gravity from the moon and sun, are immense, yet they act gently, creating bulges rather than catastrophes. The moon's pull is gentle, yet it shapes the sea with steady patience. Every molecule of ocean water feels that pull, and together they respond, flowing into the pattern the moon creates. There's no struggle, no resistance, just a natural response to a natural force. The sun adds a softer rhythm that comes and goes through the month. While the moon provides the primary beat, the sun adds harmonics, creating variation in the pattern. Sometimes the two align and reinforce each other. Sometimes they work at cross purposes and partially cancel each other out. The result is a rhythm that has texture and variation, not just monotonous repetition. Spring tides and neap tides are like louder and quieter verses of the same song. The melody is always the same, the rise and fall of water, but the amplitude changes, keeping the pattern interesting without making it unpredictable. Shorelines change daily, but they do it without hurry. The edge of the sea is never exactly the same from one day to the next, yet the changes unfold slowly enough that you can watch them happen without anxiety. A sandbar might appear over the course of a week as tides and currents deposit sand in a new location. A tidal channel might shift gradually over a season. These are not violent transformations, but gentle adjustments, the earth rearranging itself patiently. Tidal patterns can make the world feel organized, like nature's quiet timetable. In a world that often feels chaotic, tides offer structure. They remind us that nature follows rules, that patterns exist, that order underlies apparent randomness. Even if you're far from the ocean, you can imagine that slow rise and fall. You don't need to live on the coast to appreciate tides. You can picture a beach you once visited or a beach you've seen in photographs and imagine the water creeping slowly up the sand, reaching its highest point, then creeping slowly back down. The image alone can be calming, a mental anchor that helps quiet a busy mind. The image of tides can help thoughts loosen, like sand smoothing underwater. When waves wash over sand, they erase footprints and fill in holes, leaving the surface smooth and undisturbed. In the same way, imagining tides can help smooth out the roughness of accumulated thoughts and worries, letting them settle and recede. Tonight, you don't need to control anything. Just let the rhythm return on its own. Sleep is like a tide. You can't force it to arrive any more than you can force the ocean to rise. But if you stop trying to control it and simply allow yourself to relax, sleep will come naturally, just as the tide returns twice a day, every day, without fail. And like the tide, you can simply arrive at rest, naturally and gently. There's no effort required, no striving, no struggle. Just as the ocean rises because the moon pulls on it, sleep comes because your body and mind are ready for it. All you need to do is allow it, creating the conditions for rest to arrive on its own schedule. The tides continue their ancient pattern tonight, as they have for billions of years. Somewhere in the world at this very moment, the tide is rising. Water is flowing slowly up a beach, climbing a few inches every minute, covering sand that was dry moments ago. Somewhere else, the tide is falling, exposing rocks and shells that were submerged an hour ago. This process is happening all the time, all around the world, an endless cycle of rise and fall, advance and retreat, inhale and exhale. If you could see the entire Earth from space, you would see the tidal bulges moving across the planet's surface as it rotates, the moon's invisible hand sculpting the ocean's shape. You would see water flowing into bays and estuaries, then flowing back out. You would see beaches appearing and disappearing, tide pools forming and merging back into the sea. All of this happens without drama, without urgency, just the patient unfolding of natural forces that have been at work since before there was land, since before there was life. The moon is still there, even if you can't see it. Even on a cloudy night when the sky's dark, the moon is above the clouds, pulling on the ocean, maintaining the rhythm. Even on a new moon night when the moon is dark, it's still there, still exerting its gravitational pull, still shaping the tides. The moon is a constant presence, a companion to Earth that has been with us since nearly the beginning, and it will be with us until the end. The tidal bulges are always there too, even though you can't see them from the shore. If you drew a diagram of Earth's oceans, you could mark where the bulges are at this moment. One on the side facing the moon, one on the opposite side, and you could predict where they'll be an hour from now, or tomorrow, or next month. The bulges don't stop moving, and they don't become irregular. They follow the moon around the Earth with complete reliability. This reliability is deeply comforting when you think about it. In a universe that can seem chaotic and unpredictable, tides represent order. They are a promise kept every day, twice a day, without exception. No matter what else is happening in the world, the tides continue. They continue through ice ages and warm periods, through the rise and fall of civilizations, through extinctions and explosions of life. They'll continue tomorrow, and next week, and 1,000 years from now. Understanding tides helps you understand that you're part of a system much larger than yourself. The same force that pulls on the ocean pulls on you, though you're far too small to feel it. The same moon that creates tidal bulges shines on you at night. The same sun that contributes to spring tides warms your face during the day. You're connected to these cosmic processes, even if you live far inland, even if you never see the ocean. The Earth you stand on is rotating through the same space that the tides move through. You're part of the pattern. There's a kind of humility in this realization, but it's a gentle humility, not a diminishing one. Yes, you're small compared to the ocean and the moon, but you're not separate from them. You're part of the same universe, governed by the same laws, participating in the same great cycles. The water in your body came from the ocean, long ago, and it still responds to the same chemistry, the same physics, the same biological rhythms that govern life in the sea. Many biological rhythms are tied to tides, even in organisms that no longer live in the ocean. Some crabs that have been kept in laboratories far from the sea still show activity patterns that match the tidal schedule of their native beaches. Something in their biology remembers the tide, even when they can't sense it directly. Humans too may retain subtle tidal connections. Some studies have suggested correlations between tidal cycles and human behaviour or physiology, though the evidence is mixed and the effects, if they exist, are small. But it's pleasant to imagine that we still carry some faint memory of our oceanic origins, some echo of the tides in our biology. Even if we don't have biological tidal rhythms, we can certainly have psychological ones. The image of tides is powerful because it matches patterns we recognise in our own lives. Energy rises and falls, moods come and go, motivation ebbs and flows. Just as the tide is predictable but not constant, human experience includes natural cycles. Trying to fight these cycles is often counterproductive. Accepting them, working with them, can bring a sense of ease. The coastline changes with the tide, but it's still the same coastline. The essence of the place remains even as the details shift. Similarly, you change from day to day, from year to year, but there's a continuity beneath the changes. You're still you, even as circumstances rise and fall around you. The tide doesn't erase the beach, it just temporarily covers it. When the tide falls, the beach is still there, unchanged in its fundamental nature. This is a useful metaphor for difficult periods. When challenges rise like a high tide, it can feel like they're covering everything, leaving no room to breathe. But high tide doesn't last. It reaches its peak and then begins to fall. The beach it covered will be revealed again. The pressures that feel overwhelming right now will recede, given time. You just have to wait, to endure, to remember that the tide always turns. And during low tide, when everything is exposed and there's plenty of space, that doesn't last either. The tide will return. But that's okay, because the cycle is normal, expected, part of the natural pattern. There's no permanent low tide and there's no permanent high tide. There's only the cycle, the rhythm, the patient oscillation between states. Sleep is a kind of low tide for consciousness. As you fall asleep, the waters of active thinking recede, exposing the quiet beach of rest. Thoughts that were swimming through your mind settle down. Worries that were floating on the surface sink to the bottom. The busy activity of wakefulness drains away, leaving calm emptiness. This process can't be forced, but it can be allowed. You can create the conditions for it. You can lie still, breathe slowly, relax your muscles and quiet your mind. And then, just as the tide follows the moon, sleep will follow your relaxation. Not immediately perhaps, but inevitably. The moon doesn't have to try to pull the ocean. It just does, because that's what gravity does. Your body doesn't have to try to sleep. It just will, because that's what bodies do when they're relaxed and safe. Safety is important. Tides feel safe because they're predictable. You can trust that the tide will behave as expected. In the same way, sleep requires trust. You have to trust that it's safe to let go, to release control, to allow consciousness to fade. Your body will keep breathing, your heart will keep beating, all the automatic processes will continue. You don't need to supervise them. You can let go. The ocean lets go too, in a way. It doesn't hold on to the water. When the tide rises, water flows in. When the tide falls, water flows out. The ocean doesn't try to keep the water at high tide forever. It allows the pattern to unfold, releasing and accepting water according to the tidal rhythm. You can do the same with thoughts and worries. Let them flow in, let them flow out. Don't try to hold on to pleasant thoughts or push away unpleasant ones. Just let them move through, like water moving with the tide. Imagine standing on a beach right now, at this quiet moment. The sun has set, and the sky is darkening. The ocean is calm, just gentle waves lapping at the sand. You can hear the soft, rhythmic sound of water meeting shore. The tide is falling, slowly pulling back, leaving darker, wetter sand in its wake. Small shells and bits of seaweed mark the high tide line, showing where the water reached earlier. As you stand there, you can feel the day ending just as the tide is turning. The activity and energy of the day are ebbing away, flowing back out to sea. Your thoughts are following the same pattern, receding like the water, leaving your mind quiet and clear. There's no rush. The tide takes hours to go out fully, and that's fine. You have all the time you need. The air is cool but not cold. There's a light breeze carrying the smell of salt and seaweed, clean and fresh. The sand under your feet is still slightly warm from the day's sun, though it's cooling now. You can feel the transition from day to night, from activity to rest, from wakefulness to sleep. It's all happening naturally without any effort from you. The moon is rising somewhere, though you might not be able to see it yet. But it's there, pulling gently on the ocean, creating the tide that's now retreating from the shore. That same gentle pull is acting on you, drawing you towards sleep. Not demanding, not forcing, just a quiet invitation to rest. You notice a tide pool nearby, left behind by the receding water. It's calm, sheltered from the waves, reflecting the darkening sky. The water in the pool is perfectly still, like a mirror. Nothing disturbs it. This is what your mind can become, a still pool, reflecting the sky, calm and undisturbed. Thoughts may drift across the surface occasionally, like a small cloud moving across the reflection, but they don't create ripples. The stillness remains. The sound of the waves is becoming a rhythm, a gentle pulse that matches your breathing. Each wave arrives, spreads across the sand, then retreats. Arrive, spread, retreat. Arrive, spread, retreat. It's hypnotic in its regularity, like a metronome set to the slowest, most peaceful tempo imaginable. Your breath can follow this rhythm. Breathe in as the wave arrives. Breathe out as it retreats. Let your breathing become as slow and as easy as the tide. There's no one else on this beach. It's yours alone, a private space where you can simply be, without any expectations or obligations. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to go anywhere. You can just stand here, or sit, or lie down on the soft sand, and let the evening deepen around you. The world is taking care of itself. The tide is doing what it needs to do. The moon is following its orbit. Earth is rotating on its axis. All the vast machinery of the cosmos is running smoothly, and you don't need to manage any of it. You can rest. As the tide continues to fall, the beach becomes wider. More sand is exposed, stretching out into the growing darkness. The edge of the water is farther away now, a dim line in the distance. The space between you and the ocean is expanding, creating more room, more peace, more quiet. This is what falling asleep feels like. The busy world retreating, leaving more and more space for rest. The stars are beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Just a few at first, the brightest ones, breaking through the deepening blue. Then more and more as your eyes adjust and the sky grows darker. Each star is impossibly far away, yet their light reaches you, gentle and steady. They've been shining for thousands of years, and they'll continue shining for thousands more. They're another kind of constancy, another reminder that some things are reliable and enduring. The moon appears now, low on the horizon, rising slowly. It's the same moon that creates the tides, the same moon that has watched over Earth for billions of years. Its face is familiar, covered with the same patterns of light and shadow that humans have gazed at throughout history. The moon has watched the rise and fall of species, the drift of continents, the ebb and flow of ice, ages. It has seen everything, and it remains calm and steady, following its orbit, pulling on the ocean, maintaining the rhythm. Tonight the moon is in a phase that creates a particular kind of tide. Maybe it's a spring tide with the sun and moon aligned, creating the largest tidal range. Or maybe it's a neap tide with the sun and moon at right angles, creating the smallest tidal range. Either way, the tide is doing exactly what it should be doing, following the pattern that physics dictates. There's no uncertainty, no hesitation. The moon pulls, the ocean responds, and the tide moves according to rules that have never varied. You can trust this. You can trust that the tide will keep following its pattern tonight, tomorrow, next week, next month. You can trust that the moon will keep orbiting, that gravity will keep working, that the natural order will persist. And in the same way, you can trust that sleep will come, that rest will arrive, that your body knows how to transition from wakefulness to sleep just as surely as the ocean knows how to respond to the moon. The waves are getting quieter now, or maybe you're just becoming less aware of them as your attention turns inward. The external world is fading, becoming less important, less demanding. The beach, the ocean, the sky. They're all still there, but they're receding into the background, like the tide receding from the shore. What remains is an inner quiet, a space of rest that's opening up inside you. This is the space where sleep lives. It's always there, always available, but you can only enter it when you let go of the waking world. You have to release your grip on thoughts and concerns, allowing them to flow away like water flowing out with the tide. Some of them might return later, like the tide returning, but for now you can let them go. They'll be fine without your attention. Everything will be fine. The temperature is dropping slightly as the night deepens, but you're comfortable. Your body is regulating itself, adjusting to the changing conditions without any conscious effort from you. Your heart is beating steadily. Your lungs are breathing rhythmically. Your muscles are relaxing, releasing the tension they held during the day. All of this is happening automatically, part of your body's wisdom, part of the natural pattern. You realize that you are like the ocean. You have tides too, tides of energy and wakefulness that rise and fall throughout the day. Right now, your tide is falling, your energy ebbing away, your alertness receding. This is natural and good. It means your body is preparing for sleep, entering the part of the cycle where rest happens. You don't need to fight this or resist it. You can welcome it, the way a beach welcomes the receding tide, knowing that space and rest are being created. The moon continues its slow arc across the sky. It moves so gradually that you can't perceive the motion, yet it's moving nonetheless, travelling along its orbit at thousands of miles per hour. The motion is smooth and silent, undisturbed by anything. The moon doesn't struggle or strain. It simply follows its path, pulled by Earth's gravity, pulling on Earth in return, locked in an eternal dance that requires no effort, no thought, no will. It just happens, naturally and inevitably. Your transition into sleep can be like this, effortless, natural, inevitable. You don't have to make it happen. You just have to allow it, to stop resisting, to let yourself follow the natural path into rest. The moon doesn't try to orbit Earth. It just does. You don't have to try to sleep. You just will, when the time is right, when the conditions are ready. Those conditions are gathering now. The day has ended, the light has faded, the world has grown quiet. Your body is relaxed, your mind is calm. The tide of wakefulness has almost completely receded, leaving behind a broad, peaceful expanse of rest. Just a little more time, a little more letting go, and sleep will arrive as naturally as the tide turning. The waves continue their gentle rhythm, in and out, rise and fall. Each cycle is complete in itself, yet part of a larger pattern. Each breath you take is the same, complete in itself, yet part of the endless rhythm of breathing that has sustained you since birth and will continue until the end. There's something profound about rhythm, about repetition, about cycles. They create a sense of security, a feeling that all is well, that the universe is functioning as it should, and it is. Despite all the complexity and uncertainty in the world, the fundamental patterns persist. The Earth rotates, the Moon orbits, the Sun rises and sets, the tides ebb and flow. These are constants you can count on, anchors in a changing world. Tonight they continue as they always have, and they'll continue tomorrow, and the next day, and long after. You're part of this great continuity, this ancient pattern. You belong here, in this moment, on this planet, under this sky, watched over by this moon. Let that belonging settle into your bones. Let the knowledge that you are part of the pattern bring you peace. You don't have to earn your place or justify your existence. You simply are, just as the ocean simply is, just as the tide simply is. You're a natural part of the world, and the world knows how to take care of you. It knows how to bring you rest, how to restore your energy, how to prepare you for tomorrow. All you have to do is let it. Let go. Let the tide of sleep carry you gently out from the shore of wakefulness into the deeper waters of rest. The journey is safe. The ocean knows the way. You can trust the process, the way you trust the tide to follow its pattern. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Feel the gentle support beneath you, like floating on calm water. Feel your body becoming heavier, sinking into relaxation, releasing into rest. The moon pulls gently, and the tide responds. Your body calls gently for sleep, and you can respond. No resistance, no effort, just a simple allowing. The pattern is complete, the day has ended, the tide has turned, and sleep is here, arriving naturally and gently, just as it should, just as it always does. Welcome it. Let it carry you, and rest. The next story is about to begin. Please relax and enjoy. Bioluminescence is light produced by living organisms. It's one of those phenomena that sounds almost magical when you first hear about it. Living things that glow, but it's actually grounded in straightforward chemistry and biology. When we talk about bioluminescence, we're talking about organisms that create their own light through chemical reactions happening inside their bodies. This is different from things that simply reflect light, like a mirror or a white surface. The organism itself is the source of the glow, generating photons through biological processes that have evolved over millions of years. What makes this particularly interesting is that bioluminescent light comes from within. Many bioluminescent organisms produce their glow through a chemical reaction that takes place inside their cells or in specialized organs designed specifically for making light. The reaction typically involves a light-producing molecule called luciferin. The name comes from the Latin word for light-bearing, which gives you a sense of how central this molecule is to the whole process. Luciferin isn't just one specific chemical, it's actually a term that covers several different molecules that serve similar purposes in different organisms. Each type of luciferin has its own particular structure, but they all share the ability to produce light when they undergo the right kind of chemical reaction. Along with luciferin, these reactions usually involve an enzyme called luciferase. Enzymes are biological catalysts, which means they help chemical reactions happen more quickly or efficiently without being consumed in the process. Luciferase takes luciferin and helps it react in a way that releases energy in the form of light rather than heat. This partnership between luciferin and luciferase is fundamental to most bioluminescence we observe in nature. The enzyme essentially guides the reaction, making sure that when luciferin breaks down or combines with other molecules, the energy gets released as visible light. Oxygen plays an important role in many of these light-producing reactions as well. In the most common pathway, luciferin combines with oxygen in a reaction facilitated by luciferase, and this combination releases energy. Some of that energy comes out as light. The exact details vary depending on the organism and the specific type of luciferin involved, but oxygen is frequently a key ingredient in the mix. Without it, many organisms simply wouldn't be able to glow. One of the most fascinating aspects of bioluminescent light is that it's often called cold light. This term refers to the fact that bioluminescence produces very little heat compared to the light it generates. When you think about traditional light sources like incandescent bulbs, a huge amount of the energy they use gets converted into heat rather than visible light. That's why those bulbs get so hot to the touch. Bioluminescence, on the other hand, is remarkably efficient. The chemical reactions that produce the glow convert most of their energy directly into light. with minimal heat as a byproduct. This efficiency is part of what makes bioluminescence so special from both a biological and a practical standpoint. The glow itself can take different forms. Some bioluminescent organisms produce a steady, continuous glow that stays relatively constant over time. Others flash or pulse, creating rhythmic patterns of light and darkness. These pulses can be quick, like the rapid blinking of certain fireflies, or slow and gentle, like the soft undulations of light you might see in some jellyfish. The pattern depends on how the organism controls the chemical reaction, whether it can start and stop it quickly, or whether the glow builds and fades more gradually. What's particularly remarkable is that bioluminescence appears in many different groups of life, spread across the tree of life in ways that suggest it evolved independently multiple times. It's not limited to one family or one branch of organisms. You find bioluminescence in bacteria, in fungi, in various types of plankton, in jellyfish and other cnidarians, in certain squid and fish, in some beetles like fireflies, and even in a few worms and other creatures. This wide distribution tells us that the ability to produce light has been useful enough that evolution arrived at it over and over again through different pathways. You can think of bioluminescence as nature's version of quiet lanterns, small lights created through simple chemistry but deployed in sophisticated ways. There's something calming about that image. Organisms carrying their own gentle illumination through dark environments, using basic molecular tools to create something as ethereal as light. It's a reminder that even the most enchanting natural phenomena often come down to chemistry and biology, working in elegant, efficient ways. The evolution of bioluminescence is itself a fascinating story, one that involves countless small steps and adaptations across vast stretches of time. When we consider how something as specific as light production could evolve, we have to think about the incremental advantages that even dim or inefficient glowing might provide. Perhaps the earliest forms of bioluminescence were accidental, waste products of certain metabolic reactions that happened to emit a few photons. If those photons provided even a slight advantage, maybe startling a predator just enough to create a moment's hesitation, then organisms with that trait might survive slightly better than those without it. Over generations, natural selection would favour improvements to this system. Mutations that made the light brighter, or that allowed better control over when the light appeared, or that changed the colour of the light to something more useful in a particular environment. These would spread through populations. Eventually, what started as a barely noticeable glow could become a sophisticated, signalling system or an effective form of camouflage. The fact that bioluminescence evolved independently in so many different lineages tells us something important about the nature of evolution itself. When similar environmental pressures exist, darkness, the need to communicate, the challenge of finding food or mates, evolution often finds similar solutions, even starting from completely different genetic and biochemical starting points. This is called convergent evolution, and bioluminescence is one of the clearest examples of it. Now that we've established what bioluminescence is at its most basic level, it's worth exploring where this living light is most commonly found, and why certain environments seem to favour these glowing organisms. The ocean, particularly the deeper parts of it, is where bioluminescence truly flourishes. The prevalence of light-producing organisms in marine environments isn't random. It's deeply connected to the physics of light and water and to the challenges of living in a place where sunlight becomes increasingly scarce. Bioluminescence is extremely common in the ocean, especially as you descend into deeper waters. Near the surface, where sunlight penetrates easily, bioluminescence exists but isn't as essential. As you go deeper, though, sunlight fades quickly. Water absorbs and scatters light, and different wavelengths of light penetrate to different depths. Red light, with its longer wavelength, gets absorbed first, disappearing within just a few meters of the surface. Orange and yellow follow, then green. Blue light, with its shorter wavelength, can penetrate the deepest, but even that eventually fades as you descend. In the open ocean, many animals live in what's known as the twilight zone, a region that typically starts around 200 meters down and extends to about 1,000 meters. In this zone, there's still some faint light filtering down from above, but it's dim and almost entirely blue. The environment has a perpetual twilight quality, not dark enough to be completely black, but nowhere near bright enough for the kind of vision we're used to. In this strange half-lit world, small points of light stand out dramatically. A tiny bioluminescent flash can be visible from a considerable distance, making it useful for communication, for finding mates, or for startling potential predators. The twilight zone is home to an enormous biomass of organisms, many of them bioluminescent. Schools of small fish, clouds of krill and other crustaceans, jellyfish drifting on currents, all of these move through the dim blue light, many of them carrying their own light-producing capabilities. During the day, many of these organisms remain at depth, but as night falls, they often migrate upward toward more food-rich surface waters. This daily vertical migration is one of the largest movements of biomass on the planet, and bioluminescence plays a role in it, helping organisms communicate and navigate during their journeys. Deeper still, below the twilight zone, the ocean becomes almost completely dark. This is the midnight zone and below, where sunlight essentially doesn't reach at all. Here, bioluminescence becomes even more prevalent. Estimates suggest that a significant majority of organisms living in the deep ocean have some capacity for bioluminescence. In this perpetual darkness, light becomes a valuable tool. It can serve as a form of communication between members of the same species, helping them find each other in the vast emptiness. It can act as a lure, attracting prey toward a predator. It can serve as camouflage through counter-illumination, which we'll explore more later. The point is that in an environment without sunlight, the ability to produce your own light becomes remarkably useful. Many bioluminescent creatures in the ocean are small, tiny plankton, small fish, diminutive squid, but their light can still be quite noticeable in the darkness. Some of these glows appear as tiny sparkles, like underwater stars scattered through the water column. If you could somehow observe a cross-section of the deep ocean in the dark, you might see countless small points of light drifting, flashing, or glowing steadily, creating a sort of inverted night sky. Each point of light represents an organism going about its business, whether that's hunting, communicating, or simply existing in its dark habitat. The distribution of bioluminescent organisms isn't uniform throughout the ocean. In some areas, particularly where ocean currents bring nutrients together or where underwater features like seamounts create special conditions, concentrations of bioluminescent life can be especially high. These areas become hotspots of glowing activity, with more frequent flashes and glows as organisms interact, hunt, and communicate. Other organisms produce light that appears as soft glowing patches or lines along their bodies. Some fish have rows of photophores, specialized, light-producing organs, arranged along their sides or bellies. Some squid have scattered photophores that can create complex patterns. The distribution of these light organs isn't random. It's shaped by evolution to serve specific purposes, whether that's species recognition, camouflage, or something else entirely. Not all marine bioluminescence happens in the deep sea, though. Many bioluminescent organisms are active at night near the surface as well. Certain types of plankton, for instance, live in the upper layers of the ocean but produce light primarily at night, when the risk of being seen by visual predators is lower. This creates interesting dynamics where organisms migrate vertically through the water column on a daily cycle, rising toward the surface at night and descending during the day. Even near shore in relatively shallow water, you can sometimes see glowing waves caused by tiny organisms. When conditions are right, usually warm water and high concentrations of certain types of bioluminescent plankton, the mechanical disturbance of waves breaking or water being stirred can trigger millions of microscopic organisms to flash simultaneously. This creates a glow that ripples through the water, visible from shore. It's a gentle phenomenon, a soft blue-green glow that appears and fades, and it's one of the most accessible forms of bioluminescence for people who don't have access to deep-sea submersibles. The prevalence of bioluminescence in marine environments compared to terrestrial ones is striking. While we do have fireflies and glowing fungi on land, the percentage of species that are bioluminescent is much higher in the ocean. This makes sense when you consider the environments. On land, there's usually at least some ambient light from the moon and stars, even on the darkest nights. In many terrestrial environments, there are also places to hide, under leaves, in burrows, behind rocks. In the open ocean, especially at depth, there's nowhere to hide and often no ambient light at all. Bioluminescence fills a niche that exists more urgently in the ocean than on land. With this understanding of where bioluminescence is most common, especially in the ocean's quiet darkness, we can now turn our attention to the question of why organisms glow. What purposes does living light serve? The answers are practical and grounded in the day-to-day challenges of survival, but they're no less interesting for being pragmatic. One of the most straightforward reasons for bioluminescence is communication between members of the same species. In a dark environment, visual signals have to produce their own light to be seen. If you're a bioluminescent organism looking for others of your kind, a recognizable pattern of light can serve as a beacon. This is particularly important for reproduction. Many bioluminescent organisms use light to attract mates, producing specific patterns that members of their own species can recognize. These patterns function like visual mating calls, allowing individuals to find each other even when scattered across large distances in the dark ocean. The specificity of these patterns is important. In any given area of ocean, there might be dozens or even hundreds of different species living in proximity. If they all produce the same pattern of light, the signal would become useless. Too much noise, not enough clear information. So evolution has favoured the development of species-specific patterns. One species might produce 3 quick flashes followed by a pause, another might produce a steady glow that pulses in intensity. A third might create a complex pattern of flashes from different photophores on its body in sequence. These different patterns allow organisms to recognize their own species reliably. Some organisms use light to startle or confuse predators, giving themselves a crucial moment to escape. Imagine you're a predator hunting in the dark using whatever limited vision you have. Suddenly, the creature you're approaching produces a bright flash of light. The unexpected stimulus might cause you to hesitate or recoil, and that split second of confusion could be all the prey needs to dart away. Some squid and shrimp employ this strategy, producing sudden bursts of light or even releasing clouds of glowing fluid that create visual chaos while the animal escapes into the darkness. The effectiveness of this strategy depends partly on the element of surprise. If a predator encountered glowing prey all the time, it might become desensitized to the flashes. But because most organisms conserve their bioluminescence and only use it when necessary, each flash retains its capacity to startle. The predator doesn't know exactly when the flash will come, which maintains the defensive value of the light. Conversely, some organisms use light to lure prey closer. The most famous example is probably the anglerfish, with its bioluminescent lure dangling in front of its mouth. The lure acts like a small beacon in the dark, attracting smaller fish or invertebrates that are drawn to the light. When prey comes close enough to investigate, the anglerfish can strike. This strategy turns the prey's own attraction to light into a vulnerability. The anglerfish lure is a modified fin spine that has evolved into a fishing rod of sorts, complete with a glowing tip. The glow comes from bioluminescent bacteria living in a specialized bulb at the end of the lure. The anglerfish can control the lure's position, waving it enticingly to mimic the movement of small prey organisms. In the absolute darkness of the deep sea, this small glowing object might be the only visible thing for meters in any direction, making it incredibly attractive to potential prey that are accustomed to following light signals. Different species of anglerfish have evolved different lure shapes and behaviors, presumably to attract different types of prey or to fish in different ways. Some lures are simple bulbs, others have elaborate appendages or complex shapes. The diversity of lures reflects the diversity of deep-sea environments and the different ecological niches these fish occupy. Then there's the fascinating phenomenon of counter-illumination, which is a form of camouflage that uses light in a counterintuitive way. If you're a fish or squid living in the twilight zone, there's a faint blue glow coming from above due to the filtered sunlight. If you're seen from below against this faint background, you appear as a dark silhouette. Predators hunting from below can use this silhouette to locate prey. Counter-illumination solves this problem by producing light on the underside of the body that matches the intensity and colour of the faint light from above. This effectively erases the silhouette, making the organism much harder to detect from below. It's camouflage through matching the ambient light, rather than through matching the surrounding visual texture. The precision required for effective counter-illumination is remarkable. The organism needs to produce light that matches not just the colour of the downwelling light, but also its intensity, and that intensity changes depending on depth, time of day, and weather conditions at the surface. Many organisms that use counter-illumination have sophisticated control systems that allow them to adjust their ventral light output continuously. Some have light-sensing organs on their backs that measure the downwelling light, and neural circuits that adjust the ventral photophores to match. This creates a sort of active camouflage system, constantly updating to maintain invisibility. It's energetically expensive. The organism has to produce light continuously while in the twilight zone. But the survival advantage of being invisible to predators below is apparently worth the cost. Some bioluminescent displays may serve as warnings to predators. Certain organisms that are toxic, unpalatable, or difficult to eat produce light that could signal their unsuitability as prey. This is similar to how some brightly coloured land animals use their appearance to advertise that they're not worth eating. The bioluminescence becomes a warning sign in an environment where colour as we usually think of it isn't visible. This type of warning coloration, called a persematism, is common on land but less well documented in the deep sea, partly because it's harder to study. However, there's evidence that some glowing organisms are indeed avoided by predators that have learned to associate certain light patterns with bad experiences. Some bioluminescent jellyfish, for instance, have stinging cells that make them unpleasant to eat, and their glow may help predators learn to avoid them. Other uses of bioluminescence involve creating confusion through multiple moving points of light. Some organisms can release glowing material into the water, creating a cloud of light that obscures their actual position. While the predator is distracted by or focused on this glowing cloud, the organism can escape. It's a decoy strategy that uses light as misdirection. Certain deep-sea squid are particularly adept at this. They can eject glowing mucus or ink from specialized glands, creating a luminous cloud roughly the same size and shape as the squid itself. The cloud hangs in the water, glowing, while the squid jets away in a different direction. A predator, seeing this glowing blob, might attack it, only to discover it's inedible mucus rather than squid. In some cases, bioluminescence may help organisms illuminate their immediate surroundings slightly, though this use is more debated. The light levels produced by most bioluminescent organisms are quite faint, and wouldn't provide much in the way of useful illumination for seeing objects. However, for organisms with extremely sensitive eyes adapted to near total darkness, even a faint glow might provide some useful information about the environment. Some deep-sea fish have photophores near their eyes, positioned in ways that could potentially illuminate objects directly in front of the fish. Whether this actually helps them see better is uncertain. The light levels are very low, but it's a hypothesis that researchers continue to investigate. It's also possible that these near-eye photophores serve some other function, like signalling or species recognition, rather than illumination. What's striking about all these uses is how subtle they tend to be. Bioluminescence in nature is rarely about creating massive amounts of light or illuminating large areas. It's more about precise, targeted use of small amounts of light for specific purposes. The light serves as a whisper rather than a shout, a gentle signal in the darkness that conveys information efficiently and economically. Each flash, each glow, each pattern represents energy spent for a purpose, and evolution has shaped these displays to be as effective as possible with minimal waste. The energy economy of bioluminescence is worth considering in more detail. Producing light requires resources. The organism has to synthesize luciferin, which involves metabolic pathways that consume energy and raw materials. It has to produce and maintain luciferase enzymes. It has to build and maintain specialized light organs if it has them. All of this represents an investment that has to pay off in survival or reproductive benefits. For organisms living in food-poor environments like the deep sea, every calorie matters. They can't afford to waste energy on unnecessary displays. This is why bioluminescence in the deep sea tends to be brief and purposeful. An organism might flash for a fraction of a second to startle a predator, or glow for a few seconds while searching for a mate, but it won't maintain a continuous bright glow unless that serves a specific function like counter-illumination. The efficiency of the light-producing reaction helps with this energy economy. Because bioluminescence produces light with minimal heat waste, the organism gets more light output per calorie invested compared to what would be possible with a less efficient reaction. This efficiency makes bioluminescence viable as a strategy even in energy-poor environments. Now let's return to the chemistry itself and explore in a bit more detail how the glow actually happens inside these organisms. We've mentioned luciferin and luciferase, but there's more to the story, including how organisms control their light and why different creatures glow in different colours. The luciferin-luciferous reaction is the most common mechanism for bioluminescence, but the specifics can vary quite a bit from one organism to another. Different species have evolved different types of luciferin molecules. These molecules might look quite different chemically, but they share the common property of being able to release light when they react. In fireflies, for example, the luciferin is a specific compound called firefly luciferin, which has a particular chemical structure unique to beetles. In certain marine organisms, the luciferin might be a compound called calentrazine, which is widespread among jellyfish, some squid, some fish, and various other creatures. There are other types as well, each evolved independently, and each with its own chemical properties. Calentrazine is particularly interesting because it's so widespread among marine organisms, appearing in animals from different phyla that aren't closely related. This suggests that either calentrazine-based bioluminescence evolved very early and was inherited by many descendant groups, or that different lineages independently evolved the ability to use this particular molecule. The molecule itself can be synthesized by some organisms, while others obtain it through their diet, eating prey that contain calentrazine and then using it for their own bioluminescence. The reaction mechanism for calentrazine-based bioluminescence is well understood. The molecule reacts with oxygen in the presence of a luciferous enzyme, forming an unstable intermediate compound. This intermediate breaks down, releasing carbon dioxide and a photon of light. The specific wavelength of that photon, which determines its color, depends on the detailed structure of the luciferase enzyme and the environment around the reaction. Firefly luciferin works through a similar but chemically distinct pathway. In the presence of ATP, the cell's energy currency, magnesium ions, oxygen, and firefly luciferase, firefly luciferin undergoes a series of reactions that ultimately produce light. The efficiency of this reaction is extraordinary. In laboratory conditions, firefly luciferase can convert chemical energy to light with quantum efficiency approaching 90%, meaning that nearly every luciferin molecule that reacts produces a photon. This is far more efficient than any artificial light source humans have developed. The color of the light an organism produces depends on several factors, including the specific chemistry of the light-producing reaction and the structure of the proteins and molecules involved. When luciferin reacts and releases energy, that energy comes out as photons, particles of light. The wavelength of those photons, which determines what color we perceive, depends on the amount of energy in each photon. Higher energy photons appear more blue or violet. Lower energy photons appear more red or orange. The structure of the luciferase enzyme and the environment around the luciferin can affect how much energy each photon carries, which in turn affects the color of the light. Many marine organisms produce blue or blue-green light, and this isn't random. Blue light happens to travel through seawater much better than other colors. Remember how red light gets absorbed quickly near the surface? That same principle applies to bioluminescent light. If you're producing light to communicate or to be seen, blue-green is the most efficient color to use in water because it will travel the farthest before being absorbed or scattered. The absorption properties of seawater create a selective pressure favoring blue-green bioluminescence. An organism that produced red light in the deep ocean would be at a disadvantage because its signals wouldn't travel far. Over evolutionary time, natural selection has favored blue-green light production in marine environments, which is why the vast majority of marine bioluminescence falls in this part of the spectrum. Some organisms produce green light, and some can even produce yellow or red light under certain conditions, though red is quite rare in marine environments. There are a few deep-sea fish that produce red light, and they use it in interesting ways. Because most deep-sea organisms have eyes adapted to detect blue light and can't see red at all, a red light becomes like a private flashlight. The fish can illuminate its surroundings or illuminate potential prey without the prey knowing it's being observed. It's a clever adaptation that exploits the sensory limitations of other organisms. On land, fireflies often produce yellow-green or yellow light, which is visible in air and doesn't need to travel through water. The color is optimized for their specific environment and their specific needs. Different species of fireflies produce slightly different colors, ranging from yellow to orange to green, depending on small variations in their luciferase enzymes. These color differences can contribute to species recognition. A female firefly is more likely to respond to the precise color and flash pattern of her own species. Producing light requires energy, just like any other biological process. The organism has to synthesize luciferin, maintain the luciferase enzyme, and provide the conditions for the reaction to occur. Because of this energy cost, organisms have evolved ways to control when they glow. It wouldn't make sense to glow continuously if you don't need to. That would waste resources that could be used for growth, reproduction, or other vital functions. Some organisms can switch their light on and off very quickly. Fireflies are masters of this, able to produce rapid, precisely timed flashes. The control mechanism in fireflies involves nerve signals that trigger the light organ to produce the chemical conditions necessary for the reaction. When the signal arrives, the cells in the light organ emit oxygen, which combines with luciferin in the presence of luciferase, and light is produced. When the signal stops, the oxygen supply is restricted and the light goes out. This allows for the rapid flashing patterns that make fireflies so distinctive. The light organ in a firefly is a complex structure with multiple cell types working together. There are photocytes, which are the cells that actually produce the light. These are surrounded by reflector cells that contain uric acid crystals, which help direct the light outward rather than letting it scatter in all directions. The whole organ is connected to the tracheal system, the network of tubes that fireflies use to breathe, and neural control of the tracheal endings regulates oxygen delivery to the photocytes. It's an elegant system that allows precise on-off control. In some marine organisms, the control is mediated by neural signals as well. Certain squid, for instance, can control their photophores with remarkable precision, turning individual light organs on and off to create complex patterns. The neural control is similar in principle to how we might control our muscles. A nerve impulse triggers a change in the organ that leads to light production. Some squid have dozens or even hundreds of individual photophores scattered across their bodies, each one potentially under independent neural control. This allows them to create complex moving patterns of light, like animated displays. The purpose of these elaborate patterns isn't always clear, but they likely serve in communication, perhaps helping squid recognize each other or coordinate behavior in groups. In other organisms, the glow may be more constant or slow-changing. Some jellyfish, for example, produce a glow that pulses slowly, fading in and out over seconds rather than flashing rapidly. The control mechanism here might be less about nerve signals and more about the gradual accumulation and depletion of the chemicals needed for the reaction, or about slower changes in the chemical environment inside the light-producing cells. In jellyfish that produce light in response to physical disturbance, the trigger is often mechanical. Specialized cells detect pressure or vibration, and this mechanical stimulus initiates a cascade of events that leads to light production. The system is self-limiting. After producing a flash, the cells need time to reset before they can flash again. This creates the characteristic pulsing pattern you see when you disturb bioluminescent jellyfish. This ability to control light is like having a tiny dimmer switch or on-off switch built into the organism's biology. It allows for sophisticated use of light as a tool, enabling organisms to send signals, create patterns, or save energy when light isn't needed. The precision of this control is a testament to how evolution can fine-tune even something as seemingly simple as a chemical reaction to serve complex purposes. The cellular machinery that enables this control is itself fascinating. Inside a photocyte or other light-producing cell, there are mechanisms to store luciferin and luciferase separately until needed, prevent premature reactions, trigger the reaction on demand, and then clear away the products so the cell can produce light again. All of this happens at a microscopic scale, coordinated by the cell's internal systems. Some organisms store luciferin and luciferase in separate cellular compartments, only allowing them to mix when light production is needed. Others keep them together but control the availability of oxygen or other cofactors that are necessary for the reaction. The specific mechanism varies, but the principle is the same: maintain tight control over when and how the light-producing reaction occurs. With the chemistry explained in a bit more depth, it's nice to shift focus to some familiar examples of bioluminescence that many of us have encountered, or at least heard about. Fireflies are perhaps the most widely recognized bioluminescent organisms, particularly in regions where they're common during warm months. Their soft blinking lights on summer evenings have a nostalgic, almost magical quality, and they provide a perfect example of bioluminescence used for communication. Fireflies are actually beetles, members of the family Lampyridae. Despite their name, they're not flies at all. During their adult stage, many species produce light from a specialized organ located in their abdomen. The organ consists of layers of cells that contain luciferin, luciferase, and the other components needed for the light-producing reaction. The outer layers of the organ allow the light to shine through clearly, while the inner layers may contain reflective materials that help direct the light outward rather than letting it dissipate into the body. For most firefly species, the primary purpose of the glow is communication related to mating. Male fireflies typically fly around producing flashes in species-specific patterns. Female fireflies, often waiting on vegetation or on the ground, observe these patterns. When a female sees a pattern that matches her species, she may respond with her own flash. This back-and-forth exchange of light signals allows males and females to find each other in the dark. The pattern is key. The timing between flashes, the duration of each flash, and the number of flashes in a sequence all contribute to species recognition. The specificity of these patterns is remarkable. In one study of fireflies in the Great Smoky Mountains, researchers documented multiple species active in the same areas on the same nights, each with its own distinct flash pattern. One species might flash once every several seconds while flying in a straight line. Another might fly in a J-shaped pattern, flashing at the bottom of each J. A third might produce pairs of flashes separated by a characteristic interval. These differences allow each species to maintain reproductive isolation even while sharing the same habitat. Different firefly species have evolved distinctly different flash patterns. Some produce single flashes spaced several seconds apart. Others produce rapid bursts of multiple flashes. Some fly in J-shaped patterns while flashing, creating a visual signature in the air. This diversity of patterns allows multiple species of fireflies to coexist in the same area without confusion, because each species has its own recognizable signal. The evolution of these diverse patterns is an example of what's called character displacement. When related species live in the same area, natural selection favors individuals whose signals are most distinct from other species, reducing the chances of mistaken identity and wasted mating effort. Over time, this leads to increasingly divergent signal patterns, allowing even closely related species to coexist without confusion. In some remarkable cases, fireflies can synchronize their flashes in groups. This behavior has been observed in several species, most famously in certain fireflies in Southeast Asia, and in the species Photinus carolinus in the eastern United States. During peak mating season, thousands of male fireflies may gather in an area and begin flashing in unison, creating waves of light that sweep through the landscape. The synchronization appears to involve each firefly adjusting its flash timing slightly, in response to the flashes it sees around it, leading to spontaneous coordination across the group. The exact advantage of this behavior is still debated, but it may help individual fireflies stand out, or it may make the group display more noticeable to females. The synchronization of fireflies is a beautiful example of emergence, a complex pattern arising from simple individual rules. Each firefly is essentially following a rule like, when I see a flash, advance my own flash cycle slightly. And when thousands of fireflies follow this rule simultaneously, the result is spontaneous synchronization. It's similar to how audiences sometimes spontaneously synchronize their clapping at concerts, or how certain heart cells synchronize their firing patterns. The efficiency of firefly light is remarkable. Fireflies can convert a very high percentage of the energy in their light-producing reaction directly into light, with very little wasted as heat. This efficiency is one of the things that makes bioluminescence so fascinating from a technological perspective. If we could create artificial lights that were as efficient as firefly lanterns, we could save enormous amounts of energy. Scientists have studied firefly luciferase extensively, trying to understand what makes it so efficient. The enzyme structure appears to position the reactants in exactly the right configuration to favor light production over heat production. Researchers have even created artificial versions of firefly luciferase, with modifications that change the color of the light produced, or that make the enzyme more stable at different temperatures. These engineered luciferases are used in research applications around the world. Fireflies don't begin their lives as glowing adults. They start as eggs, which hatch into larvae. The larvae look quite different from the adults. They're elongated, segmented, and somewhat worm-like. Interestingly, many firefly larvae can also produce light. These larval fireflies often live on or near the ground in moist habitats like meadows, forests, or near streams. They're predatory, feeding on snails, slugs, and other soft-bodied invertebrates. The glow in larvae may serve as a warning to predators that they're unpalatable, as many firefly larvae contain defensive chemicals. The larval stage can last a year or even 2 years for some species, during which time the larvae feed and grow through several molts. When they've accumulated enough energy and reach the appropriate size, they enter a pupal stage. During pupation, the larval body is reorganized into the adult form, complete with wings, adult light organs, and reproductive structures. The adult stage is relatively short for many species, just a few weeks during which the primary goal is reproduction. After mating and laying eggs, the adults die and the cycle begins again. Some adult fireflies don't eat at all, relying entirely on energy stored during their larval stage. Their sole purpose as adults is to find mates and reproduce. Other species do feed as adults, consuming nectar or pollen to fuel their mating flights and egg production. The diversity of firefly life histories reflects their adaptation to different environments and ecological niches. Watching fireflies drift through a warm summer evening has a deeply calming quality. Their lights appear and disappear in gentle rhythms, creating patterns against the darkening sky and landscape. It's easy to stand and watch them without any particular goal, just observing the quiet conversation of a light happening around you, the slow pace, the soft glow, the peaceful setting. It all combines to create an experience that feels restorative. It's a reminder that nature often communicates in gentle ways, and that even when it produces something as eye-catching as light, it can do so softly without harshness or glare. There's something meditative about watching fireflies. Your eyes naturally follow individual lights as they appear, trace their paths through the air and then watch them blink out. Then, another catches your attention, and another, creating a gentle exercise in focused yet relaxed attention. It's not unlike meditation practices that involve watching candles or other gentle visual stimuli. The experience slows down your thoughts and brings you into the present moment. In many cultures, fireflies have symbolic significance, often representing transience, beauty, or the presence of spirits or souls. In Japan, firefly viewing is a traditional summer activity, and certain rivers and parks are famous for their firefly displays. The insects are celebrated in poetry, art, and literature, often evoking themes of summer, love, and the fleeting nature of beauty. Now let's drift back toward the water and explore another context where bioluminescence creates beautiful displays, glowing waves and bioluminescent bays, where the simple disturbance of water can trigger millions of tiny organisms to flash, creating what looks like liquid light. Some of the most enchanting, bioluminescent displays occur when ocean waves appear to glow, sparkling with blue-green light as they roll and break. This phenomenon is caused by microscopic organisms called dinoflagellates, which are a type of plankton. Dinoflagellates are single-celled organisms that drift in the water, and while there are many species of dinoflagellates, several are capable of producing light when mechanically disturbed. The dinoflagellates responsible for glowing waves often belong to species like Noctiluca scintillans or Lingulodynium polyedrum. These organisms are quite small, typically less than a millimetre in diameter, but when present in high concentrations, their collective glow can be spectacular. During the day, you might not notice them at all, or you might see the water take on a slightly reddish or brownish tint if their population is particularly dense. At night, though, when the water is disturbed, they flash. Noctiluca scintillans is particularly interesting. Its name means nightlight and sparkling, which is wonderfully descriptive. Unlike some other bioluminescent dinoflagellates, Noctiluca is relatively large for a single-celled organism. Visible to the naked eye if you look closely at disturbed water during a bloom, the cell is roughly spherical with a trailing tentacle that it uses to capture food particles. Inside the cell are scintillans, tiny organelles that produce the flash when stimulated. The flash itself is a defense mechanism, or at least that's the leading hypothesis. When a dinoflagellate is jostled or disturbed, by a wave, by a swimming fish, by a passing boat, or even by your hand moving through the water, it produces a brief flash of light. This flash may serve to startle small predators that are trying to eat the dinoflagellate, giving it a momentary advantage. Alternatively, or additionally, the flash might attract the attention of larger predators that could eat whatever disturbed the dinoflagellate, essentially calling in help. This burglar alarm hypothesis suggests that the dinoflagellate uses light to draw attention to its attacker. Research on this burglar alarm hypothesis has shown that copepods, small crustaceans that eat dinoflagellates, do sometimes get eaten by larger predators when they trigger bioluminescent flashes. Fish hunting in the dark can see the flashes and home in on them, catching the copepods rather than the dinoflagellates. This provides evidence that the flashing does indeed help the dinoflagellates survive, though probably not every time. Regardless of the evolutionary reason, the effect is beautiful. When waves roll towards shore during a bioluminescent bloom, each breaking wave illuminates from within, outlining the curl and splash with blue-green light. Walking along the beach during such an event, every footstep in the wet sand can trigger tiny sparkles. If you wade into the water and move your hand through it, trails of light follow your movements. Swimming or kayaking through bioluminescent water creates an otherworldly experience, where every stroke leaves glowing swirls behind. The glow produced by dinoflagellates appears blue because that wavelength travels well through water, and because it's the colour produced by their particular light-generating chemistry. The specific molecules and structures involved create photons in the blue-green range of the spectrum. The light is relatively bright for a single-celled organism, but still quite faint overall. It's most visible in very dark conditions, away from artificial lights. The duration of each flash is very brief, typically lasting only a fraction of a second. The scintillons inside the dinoflagellate cell respond to mechanical disturbance by rapidly releasing their light-producing chemicals, creating a quick flash, and then the cell needs time to reset before it can flash again. This means that if you stir the water continuously, the flashing will gradually dim as more and more cells enter their refractory period. These bioluminescent events are most common in warm waters where nutrient conditions support large populations of dinoflagellates. They can be somewhat seasonal, often peaking in late summer or early fall in temperate regions. Certain bays and coastal areas have become famous for their reliable bioluminescent displays. Bioluminescent bays in places like Puerto Rico, Jamaica, and other tropical locations have high concentrations of dinoflagellates year-round, and attract visitors who want to experience the glowing water. In these bays, the water is typically calm and sheltered, which helps maintain the dinoflagellate population. On a dark night, paddling through these bays in a kayak can make you feel like you're moving through liquid starlight. Mosquito Bay in Vieques, Puerto Rico, is often cited as the brightest bioluminescent bay in the world. The bay has several features that make it ideal for bioluminescent dinoflagellates: a narrow opening to the ocean that reduces water exchange, mangrove forests around the edges that drop leaves and other organic material into the water, providing nutrients, and warm, shallow water. The dinoflagellate species here is Pyridinium bahamense, which produces a particularly bright blue flash. The conditions that lead to bioluminescent blooms are specific. The water temperature needs to be within a certain range, nutrients need to be available in the right concentrations, and the water generally needs to be relatively calm to allow the dinoflagellates to concentrate. Sometimes blooms appear unexpectedly, other times they're predictable based on seasonal patterns. Local knowledge often helps. People who live near bioluminescent areas usually have a sense of when conditions are most likely to produce displays. Red tides, which are blooms of certain dinoflagellate species that can be toxic to marine life and humans, are related to bioluminescent blooms but distinct. Some red tide species do produce bioluminescence, which can create the unusual and somewhat eerie sight of toxic, glowing red-brown water at night. However, not all bioluminescent blooms are harmful, and not all harmful blooms are bioluminescent. The two phenomena can overlap but aren't the same thing. It's one of the calmest kinds of light show in nature. Unlike fireworks or lightning, which are sudden and dramatic, bioluminescent water responds to gentle motion with gentle light. The faster and more turbulent the water movement, the more light is produced, but even vigorous splashing creates a soft glow, rather than anything harsh or glaring. You can sit by the water's edge during a bloom and watch the subtle sparkles appear and fade with each wave. There's something meditative about it. The rhythm of the waves, the soft glow, the darkness all around. It invites quiet observation rather than excitement or alarm. The experience of swimming in bioluminescent water is one that people often describe as transformative or magical, even those who understand the scientific explanation. There's something profound about being surrounded by living light, about moving through water and watching your movements create trails of luminescence. It connects you to the natural world in a visceral way, reminding you that you're part of an ecosystem full of other living things, each responding to the environment in their own ways. With those sparkling waters in mind, let's descend once more into deeper parts of the ocean and meet some of the creatures that carry their own lanterns through the midnight depths. The deep sea is home to a remarkable diversity of bioluminescent organisms, and among them, lanternfish and other small deep-sea creatures create a landscape of living light in what would otherwise be complete darkness. Lanternfish are a group of small fish belonging to the family Myctophidae, and they're one of the most abundant types of fish in the ocean. Despite their abundance, most people never encounter lanternfish because these fish live in deep water and only occasionally come near the surface, usually at night. They're typically just a few inches long, with large eyes adapted to low light conditions and bodies covered with specialized light-producing organs called photophores. The abundance of lanternfish is hard to overstate. They're found in oceans around the world, from tropical to polar waters, and in such vast numbers that they represent a significant portion of all fish biomass in the ocean. Estimates suggest there may be trillions of individual lanternfish worldwide. Despite this abundance, they remain largely unknown to most people because they live in the deep ocean's mid-water zone, an environment that's difficult for humans to access and observe. Photophores are sophisticated structures. Each photophore is essentially a tiny biological lamp, containing light-producing cells, often backed by a reflective tissue to direct the light outward and sometimes fronted by a lens-like structure that focuses or filters the light. In lanternfish, photophores are arranged in specific patterns along the sides and underside of the body. These patterns vary between species, functioning as a kind of identification system. In the dim environment of the deep sea, these light patterns allow fish to recognize members of their own species. The anatomy of a photophore reveals nature's ingenuity. At the core are the photocytes, cells that produce light through bioluminescent reactions. Behind these are layers of cells containing crystals or other reflective materials arranged to form a mirror-like backing that directs light outward. In front might be a layer of tissue that acts as a lens, focusing the light into a beam or diffusing it in a particular pattern. Some photophores even have coloured filters that modify the light's wavelength, though this is less common since most organisms produce blue-green light anyway. One of the main purposes of the photophores on the underside of lanternfish is counter-illumination. During the day or in the twilight zone where some faint light penetrates from above, a lanternfish needs to avoid being seen as a dark silhouette against the lighter background above. By activating its ventral photophores and adjusting their brightness to match the faint downwelling light, the fish can effectively disappear when viewed from below. This is a form of active camouflage. The fish continually adjusts its light output to match the changing conditions of ambient light as it moves through the water column. The challenge of counter-illumination is dynamic. As the lanternfish swims up and down in the water column during its daily vertical migration, the ambient light level changes dramatically. Near the surface at dusk there might be considerable light from above. At depth during the day there's almost none. The fish needs to adjust its photophore output constantly to maintain the match. This requires sensory systems to detect, the ambient light level and neural systems to modulate the photophores accordingly, a sophisticated feedback system operating continuously. Lanternfish aren't the only deep-sea organisms that produce light. The deep sea is absolutely full of bioluminescent creatures, representing an enormous range of body types and evolutionary lineages. Some deep-sea squid produce light through photophores, while others have symbiotic bacteria that glow. Certain deep-sea squid can release glowing mucus or ink into the water when threatened, creating a luminous cloud that confuses predators while the squid escapes into the darkness. This is similar to the way some shallow water squid and octopuses release ink, but with the added element of light. The vampire squid, despite its ominous name, is actually a gentle creature that feeds on marine snow, detritus falling through the water column. When threatened, it can eject a cloud of glowing mucus from the tips of its arms. This luminous cloud can persist for several minutes, creating a confusing display while the squid jets away. The vampire squid can also turn itself inside out, pulling its webbed arms up over its body in a defensive posture that exposes spiny projections. The combination of glowing mucus and this alien appearance is enough to deter most predators. Jellyfish are another major group of bioluminescent organisms in the deep sea. Many deep-sea jellyfish produce soft pulses or rings of light that travel along their bells or tentacles. The light can be mesmerizing to watch, gentle waves of blue or green luminescence flowing across translucent tissue. Some jellyfish seem to produce light more or less continuously at a low level, while others flash in response to disturbance. The purposes vary, but generally the light may serve to startle predators or perhaps to attract prey. A taller jellyfish, sometimes called the alarm jellyfish, has a particularly striking defense mechanism. When attacked, it produces a pinwheel, pattern of light flashes that rotate around its bell. This burglar alarm display is thought to attract larger predators that might attack whatever is disturbing the jellyfish, similar to the dinoflagellate strategy. The flashing pattern is distinct and dramatic enough that researchers can often tell when an Atala jellyfish has been disturbed in deep-sea video footage, even if the jellyfish itself isn't visible. Deep-sea shrimp provide yet another example. Some species can produce clouds of glowing fluid from glands near their mouths, creating a luminous smoke screen. When a predator approaches, the shrimp expels this glowing material and then swims away into the darkness, while the predator is distracted by the bright cloud. It's an elegant escape strategy that takes advantage of the predator's visual system. One particularly well-studied example is the deep-sea shrimp Acanthophora purpurea, which produces a blue glowing secretion from glands near its mouth. When threatened, the shrimp can eject this luminous material while simultaneously jetting backward. The combination of sudden bright light and rapid movement in the opposite direction is often enough to allow escape. Studies have shown that the glowing cloud can persist for several seconds, giving the shrimp time to put distance between itself and the predator. Even among fish beyond the lanternfish family, bioluminescence is common in the deep sea. Anglerfish, dragonfishes, hatchetfish, and many others have light-producing organs. The anglerfish's lure is perhaps the most famous, a modified dorsal fin spine that extends forward over the mouth, tipped with a glowing bulb of tissue. The light attracts prey fish, or invertebrates that approach to investigate, and when they come close enough, the anglerfish's enormous mouth snaps them up. The deep-sea anglerfish group includes many species with elaborate lures, each adapted to their particular niche. Some have simple glowing bulbs, others have lures with complex branches or appendages that may mimic the appearance of small prey organisms. The female anglerfish, which is the one with the lure, males are tiny and often parasitic, attaching to the female, sits nearly motionless in the water, conserving energy, waiting for prey to approach the lure. Dragonfish are another fascinating group. These elongated predators have bioluminescent photophores along their bodies, and in many species a chin barbel tipped with a glowing lure. They also have large teeth, and some of the deepest living species have been found to produce both blue and red light, extremely unusual in the deep sea. The red light may allow them to illuminate prey without the prey knowing, since most deep-sea organisms can't detect red wavelengths. The patterns of bioluminescent light in the deep sea serve as identity signals in an environment where visual cues are otherwise scarce. Imagine drifting through complete darkness and needing to find a mate or avoid wasting energy, trying to interact with the wrong species. A species-specific pattern of photophores solves this problem. Each species has its own arrangement and timing of lights, creating a visual signature that can be recognized even from a distance in the dark. This is especially important in the deep sea where population densities are often quite low. An individual lanternfish, for example, might not encounter another member of its species for some time. When it does, it needs to recognize them quickly and reliably. The photophore pattern provides this recognition at a glance, or, more accurately, at a glow. Many of these deep-sea glows are brief and used only when needed. Producing light costs energy, and food is often scarce in the deep ocean. Organisms don't waste energy on continuous displays unless they serve a purpose. Instead, they flash when approached, or glow when actively searching for mates, or illuminate briefly to identify themselves to others. The rest of the time, they conserve energy, drifting or swimming through darkness without illumination. This conservation of energy extends to many aspects of deep-sea life. Metabolic rates are often low, movement is often slow and efficient, and behaviours are often simplified to reduce energy expenditure. Bioluminescence fits into this pattern. It's used strategically, not wastefully. If you could somehow observe the deep ocean in its natural state at night, which is essentially identical to its state during the day since sunlight doesn't reach these depths, you would see a quiet, dark expanse punctuated by occasional small lights. A flash here, a steady glow there, a pattern of photophores drifting past. It's like a night sky turned upside down, with darkness as the dominant feature and light as the rare, precious element. There's something almost peaceful about imagining that environment. It's not hostile or frightening, just quiet and dark, with living things making their way through it using light as one tool, among many. The deep sea lacks the chaos and noise of many surface environments. There are no waves, no storms, no dramatic temperature swings. The conditions are stable, dark, cold, and calm. Life exists there at a slower pace, in some ways, adapted to the peculiar challenges of that environment. The bioluminescence is part of that adaptation, a solution to the problem of communication and survival in darkness. Now we can explore one of the more fascinating partnerships in the natural world, when bioluminescence arises not from the organism itself, but from symbiotic bacteria living inside it. This mutualistic relationship shows how cooperation between different species can solve problems in elegant ways. Some bioluminescence comes from symbiotic bacteria, rather than from the host organism's own cells. These are bacteria that produce light as part of their natural biology, and they live inside specialized organs or tissues of larger organisms. The host provides the bacteria with a safe environment and a steady supply of nutrients, while the bacteria provide the host with a reliable source of light. It's a partnership that benefits both parties. Certain squid are well-known examples of this arrangement. The Hawaiian bobtail squid, for instance, has a special organ in its body cavity that houses colonies of bioluminescent bacteria called Vibrio fischeri. During the day, the squid remains buried in sand on the seafloor. At night, it emerges to hunt for small shrimp and other prey in the shallow waters. As it swims, the bacterial light organ on its underside produces a glow that matches the moonlight or starlight filtering down from above. This counter-illumination helps the squid avoid casting a shadow that predators hunting from below could detect. The Hawaiian bobtail squid has been extensively studied as a model system for understanding symbiosis. The specificity of the relationship is remarkable. The squid only associates with Vibrio fischeri, not with other bacterial species that might be present in the water. The squid has special structures on its body that selectively attract and filter bacteria, allowing only V. fischeri to colonize the light organ. The squid has remarkable control over the light produced by its bacterial partners. Although the bacteria themselves are always glowing to some extent, the squid has developed structures around the light organ that allow it to control how much of that light is visible externally. Think of it like adjustable shutters or filters around a lamp. By covering or exposing the light organ, or by filtering the light in various ways, the squid can modulate the brightness and even the pattern of light it displays. This gives the squid the benefits of bioluminescence without having to control the actual chemical reactions. The bacteria handle that part continuously. The light organ in the bobtail squid contains specialized tissues that act like shutters, lenses, and reflectors. There's a layer of tissue that can expand or contract to cover more or less of the light organ. There are reflective cells that direct light downward. There are even structures that may help the squid measure ambient light levels, so it can adjust its counter-illumination to match. This relationship is so specific that the squid actually acquires its bacterial symbionts from the environment each generation. When young squid hatch, they don't have any bacteria in their light organs yet. Special structures on the squid's body attract the right species of bacteria from the surrounding seawater. The bacteria colonize the light organ, and the squid then modifies its tissues to support and maintain the bacterial colony. It's a fascinating example of how tightly coordinated these partnerships can be, involving specific recognition signals and specialized anatomical structures. The process of colonization involves chemical signals released by the juvenile squid that specifically attract Vibrio fischeri. The bacteria enter through pores and navigate into the light organ's crypts, where they settle and begin multiplying. As the bacterial colony establishes itself, the squid's light organ undergoes developmental changes. Certain temporary structures regress while the permanent light organ matures. This coordinated development requires communication between the squid and its bacterial partners. Symbiosis, in general terms, refers to close and often long-term relationships between different species. The relationship can take various forms, mutualism, where both benefit, commensalism, where one benefits and the other is unaffected, or parasitism, where one benefits at the expense of the other. The bacterial bioluminescence relationships we're discussing are mutualistic. The bacteria get a protected home with plenty of food, conditions that allow them to grow and reproduce. The host gets a steady, controllable source of light without having to synthesize luciferin and luciferase itself. In the case of the bacteria, their light production isn't necessarily something that evolved specifically for the symbiosis. Many of these bioluminescent bacteria can live freely in the ocean as well, producing light outside of any host. The reasons bacteria produce light when living freely aren't entirely clear, but hypotheses include using light as a signal to attract larger organisms that might consume them, thereby gaining transport to new areas, or using light as a way to create opportunities for colonization of hosts. Regardless of the evolutionary origin, the bacteria's ability to produce light has become integrated into mutualistic relationships with various hosts. One hypothesis is that bioluminescent bacteria produce light as a way of indicating when their population density is high enough for effective colonization. The light production is controlled by quorum sensing, a process where bacteria detect the density of their own population through chemical signals. When enough bacteria are present, they collectively decide to produce light. This might serve as a signal to potential hosts that a substantial bacterial colony is available for colonization. The host organism, in turn, has evolved structures and behaviors that maximize the usefulness of the bacterial light. Beyond just having a chamber where bacteria can live, many hosts have reflective layers behind the bacterial colony to direct light outward, lenses or filters to shape the light, and shutters or other mechanisms to control when the light is visible. These aren't simple containers. They're sophisticated organs that have evolved specifically to work with bioluminescent symbionts. Other animals besides squid use bacterial bioluminescence. Some fish, particularly certain types of deep-sea fish, have bacterial light organs as well. Flashlight fish, for example, have organs under their eyes that contain bioluminescent bacteria. The fish can cover and uncover these organs using dark flaps of tissue, creating a blinking effect. This may confuse predators or help the fish communicate with others of its kind. Flashlight fish are particularly interesting because they use their bacterial light organs in multiple ways. They can flash the lights rapidly to confuse predators. They can use steady light to illuminate the area around them while feeding on plankton. They can use the lights to communicate with each other, possibly coordinating group movements. The versatility of the system shows how a simple symbiotic partnership can be adapted to serve multiple functions. Ponyfish, or slipmouth fish, have bacterial light organs in their esophagus. Light from the bacteria shines down through the fish's body and out through its translucent belly. This creates counter-illumination that helps hide the fish from predators below. The fish can control the light by adjusting the position of internal structures that either block or allow light to pass through. There's something comforting about the idea of symbiotic bioluminescence. It's a reminder that not everything in nature is competition and conflict. Sometimes different organisms find ways to work together, each providing something the other needs, creating a relationship that's more effective than what either could achieve alone. In the darkness of the ocean, a tiny bacterium and a larger animal coordinate to produce light, and both are better off for it. The glow that comes from this partnership is steady and reliable. As long as the bacteria are healthy and fed, they produce light. The host doesn't have to worry about synthesizing chemicals or triggering reactions. It just has to maintain the bacteria and control how their light is used. It's a division of labor at a biological level, quiet cooperation between vastly different forms of life, working together in the dark. This division of labor extends to the metabolic level as well. The bacteria handle all the complex biochemistry of producing luciferin, luciferase, and the other molecules needed for bioluminescence. The host provides the raw materials, nutrients from its own feeding, but doesn't have to express the genes or build the molecular machinery for bioluminescence itself. It's an outsourcing arrangement that benefits both parties. The stability of these symbiotic relationships over evolutionary time is impressive. In some lineages, the partnership has persisted for millions of years, with host and symbiont evolving together. In some cases, the symbiont bacteria have become so specialized for their host relationship that they can no longer survive independently, having lost genes necessary for free-living existence. This represents a deep integration of the two organisms, where neither can fully function without the other. As we approach the end of this exploration, it's worth considering how humans have come to understand and study bioluminescence, and how this knowledge has been applied in scientific research and practical applications. The study of living light has revealed much about biology, chemistry, and evolution, and it continues to inspire new technologies and methods. Scientists study bioluminescence both in natural habitats and in controlled laboratory settings. Field research involves observing organisms in their native environments, whether that's a coral reef, a deep-sea trench, or a forest at night. Researchers use specialized equipment to detect and record bioluminescence in the wild. Some cameras are sensitive enough to detect very faint glows that the human eye would miss entirely. Submersibles equipped with low-light cameras can descend into the deep ocean and document bioluminescent organisms in their natural behaviors, capturing flashes, glows, and patterns that would otherwise go unobserved. The development of low-light cameras has been crucial for studying bioluminescence in situ. Early attempts to study deep-sea bioluminescence were hampered by the fact that bringing organisms to the surface or placing them in observation chambers often stopped them from producing light naturally. They would either be dead or too stressed to behave normally. Modern cameras can record organisms in their natural habitat without disturbing them, revealing how bioluminescence is actually used in the wild. Remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, and autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, equipped with sensitive cameras have revealed remarkable behaviors. Researchers have documented complex light displays used in courtship, recorded the exact patterns of bioluminescent fish schools as they coordinate movements, and observed previously unknown bioluminescent species. Each new observation adds to our understanding of how important light is in deep-sea ecosystems. In the laboratory, researchers can study the chemistry and genetics of bioluminescence more closely. They can isolate the luciferin and luciferase from various organisms and study how the reactions work. They can manipulate conditions, changing temperature, pH, oxygen levels, and observe how these changes affect light production. This kind of controlled experimentation has revealed much about the mechanisms underlying bioluminescence and about how different organisms control their light. Laboratory work has revealed the details of how luciferin-luciferase reactions proceed at the molecular level. Using techniques like X-ray crystallography, researchers have determined the three-dimensional structure of various luciferase enzymes, showing exactly how they bind to luciferin and facilitate the light-producing reaction. This structural information helps explain why the reaction is so efficient and why different luciferases produce different colors of light. Genetic research has been particularly illuminating. Scientists have identified the genes responsible for producing luciferase enzymes and for synthesizing luciferin precursors in various organisms. This genetic information has shown that bioluminescence evolved independently multiple times, as the genes involved in bioluminescence in different groups of organisms aren't closely related. For example, the luciferase gene in fireflies is completely different from the luciferase gene in bacteria, indicating that these abilities arose separately through convergent evolution. The genetic approach has also revealed surprising connections. Some organisms that are bioluminescent don't actually produce their own luciferin, they obtain it from their diet. This was discovered by studying the genes of these organisms and finding that they lack the genetic machinery to synthesize luciferin themselves. Instead, they've evolved the ability to use luciferin from the organisms they eat, incorporating it into their own bioluminescent systems. This is similar to how some animals obtain essential vitamins from their diet, rather than synthesizing them internally. One of the most significant applications of bioluminescence in science involves using luciferase enzymes as research tools. Because luciferase produces light in the presence of luciferin and the necessary cofactors, scientists can attach luciferase genes to other genes they want to study. When the gene of interest becomes active in a cell, the luciferase gene also becomes active, and the cell starts to glow. This provides a simple, non-invasive way to track gene activity in real time. This technique is widely used in molecular biology and medical research. For instance, researchers studying how genes are turned on and off during development can insert a luciferase gene next to the gene they're interested in. When cells activate that developmental gene, they also produce luciferase, and those cells glow. By observing which cells are glowing and when, researchers can map out patterns of gene expression in developing organisms. This has been done in everything from bacteria to mice to plants. The use of luciferase as a reporter gene has led to numerous discoveries. Researchers have tracked how cancer cells spread through the body by making the cancer cells luminescent. They've studied circadian rhythms by attaching luciferase to clock genes and watching the rhythmic glowing of cells as they go through their daily cycles. They've screened thousands of potential drug compounds by using luciferase to report whether the drugs are having their intended effects on cells. Luciferase assays, tests that use luciferase to detect specific molecules or conditions, are common in laboratories. They can be used to detect the presence of certain proteins, to measure the activity of enzymes, or to screen for drugs that affect particular cellular pathways. The advantage of using luciferase is that it produces a clear, measurable signal, light, that's easy to detect with the right equipment, and the signal appears quickly when the reaction occurs. ATP detection is one particularly useful application. Because firefly luciferase requires ATP to function, it can be used to detect the presence of living cells which contain ATP. This is used in food safety testing to detect bacterial contamination, in environmental monitoring to assess microbial populations, and in clinical settings to check the sterility of medical equipment. Beyond its use as a laboratory tool, bioluminescence has inspired practical applications in lighting and design. While we can't exactly replicate bioluminescence at a useful scale for general lighting yet, the principles of efficient light production that organisms use have influenced thinking about how to create better artificial lights. The fact that bioluminescence produces almost no heat has made it a reference point for discussions about energy-efficient lighting. If we could create lights as efficient as firefly lanterns, we'd drastically reduce the energy we use for illumination. LED technology represents a step toward this goal. LEDs are much more efficient than incandescent bulbs, converting a higher percentage of electrical energy into light rather than heat. While they're still not as efficient as bioluminescence, they're moving in that direction. Researchers studying bioluminescent enzymes continue to look for insights that might improve artificial lighting even further. Studying bioluminescence has also helped scientists understand marine ecosystems better. By documenting which organisms produce light, when they produce it, and how they use it, researchers gain insights into the structure of deep-sea communities, predator-prey relationships, and communication networks. Some deep-sea surveys now use the light patterns organisms produce as a way to identify species without having to capture them, which is less invasive and allows for observation of natural behaviour. Bioluminescence can also serve as an indicator of ecosystem health. Changes in the abundance or distribution of bioluminescent organisms can reflect changes in ocean conditions. For instance, changes in bioluminescent dinoflagellate blooms might indicate shifts in nutrient levels or water temperature. Monitoring these changes can provide early warning of larger ecosystem shifts. The aesthetic and inspirational aspects of bioluminescence shouldn't be overlooked either. Bioluminescent organisms have inspired art, literature, and design for as long as people have been aware of them. Glowing fungi in forests, fireflies on summer nights, glowing waves on beaches, these experiences have a way of sticking in memory and sparking curiosity. For many scientists, an early encounter with bioluminescence was part of what drew them to study biology in the first place. Artists have incorporated bioluminescence into their work in various ways. Some create installations using actual bioluminescent organisms. Others use artificial lights to mimic bioluminescent effects. The ethereal quality of bioluminescent light, soft, coloured, appearing and disappearing, lends itself well to artistic interpretation. It suggests themes of mystery, nature's hidden beauty, and the connection between life and light. Even in its applications in human science and technology, bioluminescence retains a sense of gentleness. It's not a harsh tool or a loud process. The glow from a luciferase assay in a laboratory is soft and visible only in the dark or with sensitive instruments. The information it provides comes through quietly, a subtle signal indicating that something has occurred at the molecular level. In that way, even when bioluminescence is used in very modern technical contexts, it carries something of the same quality it has in nature, a quiet light offering information without fanfare. Now, as we come near the end of this gentle exploration of living light, let's bring the focus back to a more personal scale, thinking about bioluminescence as a calming presence and a reminder of nature's subtlety. There's something deeply soothing about the idea of light existing without heat, without harshness, serving quiet purposes in the dark. Bioluminescence demonstrates that light can exist without the heat we usually associate with light sources. A candle flame, a light bulb, even a campfire. These all produce warmth along with their glow. But bioluminescence is different. It's light from a cold chemical reaction, a glow that doesn't burn or warm. There's something gentle about that distinction. The light exists purely to be light, to signal or illuminate or confuse, without the side effect of heat. In a way, it's light in its purest, most minimal form. This purity of function reflects something fundamental about how evolution works. Natural selection tends to eliminate waste, favouring solutions that achieve their purpose with minimal unnecessary costs. Bioluminescence that produce significant heat would waste energy that organisms in food-limited environments can't afford to squander. The coldness of bioluminescent light isn't just a chemical curiosity. It's an evolutionary necessity that has shaped these systems over millions of years. Nature uses light in subtle ways through bioluminescence. It's not about flooding an area with brightness or creating dramatic illumination. Instead, it's about small, targeted uses. A flash to startle a predator, a glow to match ambient light for camouflage, a pattern to attract a mate. Each use is specific and efficient. The organisms that produce light have evolved to do so only when it serves a purpose, and to produce just enough light to achieve that purpose without waste. This efficiency extends to every aspect of bioluminescent systems. The photophores are sized and positioned to direct light exactly where it's needed. The control systems activate light only when necessary. The chemical reactions convert energy to light with minimal losses. Every element has been refined by natural selection to maximize benefit while minimizing cost. The most common bioluminescent color in the ocean is blue-green, and there's a reason for that beyond chemistry alone. Blue-green light travels farther through seawater than other colors because water absorbs longer wavelengths more quickly. So if you're going to produce light in the ocean, blue-green is simply the most practical choice. It's an example of how evolution shapes even something as specific as the color of light to fit the environment. The beauty of that blue-green glow isn't arbitrary. It's the result of physics and natural selection working together. The match between bioluminescent wavelengths and the transmission properties of seawater is so precise that it suggests strong selective pressure. Organisms that produce light in less optimal wavelengths would be at a disadvantage. Their signals wouldn't travel as far, their camouflage wouldn't work as well, their lures wouldn't be as visible. Over generations, populations would shift toward producing the wavelengths that work best in their environment. Many glowing. Creatures only shine when they choose to, conserving energy when light isn't needed. This restraint is worth appreciating. It would be easier in some ways to glow constantly, but that would waste resources. Instead, these organisms have evolved fine control over their light, flashing or glowing only when it serves them. There's a kind of quietness to that, an understanding that light is valuable and shouldn't be squandered. This restraint reflects a broader principle in nature. Organisms do only what's necessary for survival and reproduction, avoiding unnecessary expenditure of energy. In harsh environments, this principle becomes even more important. The deep sea, with its limited food resources, strongly selects for efficiency. Every behavior, every metabolic process, every flash of light must pay for itself in terms of survival or reproductive success. Fireflies, with their gentle blinking on warm evenings, remind us that communication in nature can be quiet and beautiful. Their flashes aren't loud or aggressive. They're invitations, signals, quiet conversations happening in light rather than sound. Watching fireflies feels peaceful because they embody a kind of communication that doesn't demand attention but offers it, that doesn't shout but gently repeats itself until noticed. There's a patience to firefly signalling that's worth contemplating. A male firefly might flash dozens or hundreds of times before receiving a response. He doesn't give up or become frantic. He simply continues his pattern, trusting in the system that has worked for millions of years. When a response finally comes, the exchange proceeds calmly, a brief conversation in light that leads to connection. Glowing plankton in the waves reminds us that even the smallest forms of life can create moments of wonder. A single dinoflagellate is microscopic, essentially invisible to the naked eye in daylight. But when millions of them flash together in response to a wave, they create something beautiful. It's a reminder that scale doesn't determine significance, that the tiny and overlooked can still generate experiences that stay with us. This collective effect, where individual actions combine to create something much larger than themselves, appears throughout nature. Birds flocking, schools of fish moving in coordination, even human societies work on similar principles. Each individual follows simple rules, but the collective behaviour can be complex and beautiful. Bioluminescent plankton exemplify this perfectly, each cell flashing individually in response to disturbance, but together creating waves of light across the ocean surface. The deep sea, with its scattered points of living light in vast darkness, reminds us that darkness doesn't have to be frightening. It can be a setting for gentle lights, a backdrop that makes small glows visible and meaningful. The deep ocean isn't hostile, it's just dark, and the organisms there have adapted to that darkness in elegant ways. Their lights aren't desperate beacons but practical tools, used skillfully in an environment where they make sense. Reframing darkness as simply the absence of light, rather than as something threatening, can be calming. The deep sea shows that life thrives in darkness, that darkness is just another environment with its own challenges and opportunities. The bioluminescent organisms don't fear the dark. They use it, work with it, create beauty within it. Thinking about bioluminescence can have a softening effect on the mind. There's something calming about considering organisms that carry their own quiet light through dark places, that communicate through gentle flashes, that hide themselves by matching faint glows rather than by hiding in shadows. The whole concept of bioluminescence invites a kind of meditative attention. It's detailed enough to be interesting, but gentle enough not to be alarming. The complexity of bioluminescent systems, the chemistry, the control, mechanisms, the evolutionary adaptations, provides material for contemplation without generating anxiety. You can think about how a firefly controls its flashes, or how a squid manages its symbiotic bacteria, and these are interesting puzzles but not troubling ones. They're examples of nature solving problems elegantly, which is a fundamentally reassuring thing to consider. As you allow these thoughts about living light to settle, you might imagine the chemistry happening in a firefly's abdomen, luciferin and luciferase combining with oxygen in a reaction that produces a soft yellow-green glow. Or you might imagine a lanternfish drifting through the deep ocean, its photophores glowing faintly, camouflaging it against the dim light from far above. Or perhaps you picture a wave rolling onto a beach at night, lighting up from within as millions of dinoflagellates flash in response to the movement. These images are inherently calming. There's no conflict in them, no drama, just natural. Processes proceeding as they have for millions of years. If firefly glows because its neurons signal its light organ, which emits oxygen, which allows luciferin to react with luciferase, which produces light. It's a chain of cause and effect that's perfectly understandable, yet somehow still feels like gentle magic. Tonight, you don't need to chase these glowing phenomena or understand every detail of their chemistry. You can simply let the ideas drift past, like watching bioluminescent organisms float by in dark water. Each fact, each image, each gentle explanation can pass through your awareness without demanding anything from you. They're there to observe, to consider lightly, and then to let fade as sleep approaches. This passive observation is a skill worth cultivating. The ability to let thoughts pass without engaging with them actively, without trying to analyze or remember or do anything with them. They simply arise, exist for a moment, and then fade away, like bioluminescent flashes in deep water. You notice them without grasping at them, acknowledge them without holding on. And as you settle into sleep, you might imagine a small, steady light inside yourself. Not a literal light, but something metaphorical. Your breathing perhaps like a slow pulse of light, glowing softly with each inhale, dimming gently with each exhale. The rhythm is steady and calm, requiring no effort, continuing on its own the way bioluminescence continues in the ocean whether anyone observes it or not. In the deep darkness behind closed eyes, small thoughts might still drift like photophores in deep water, brief, faint, and then gone. That's fine. They don't need to be followed or held on to. They can simply appear and disappear, gentle points of awareness in the quiet darkness of near sleep. The world outside continues, with its fireflies and glowing waves and deep-sea creatures carrying their lanterns through the dark. They'll keep glowing through the night, following their ancient patterns, using their light for communication and survival and all the practical purposes evolution has assigned to them. But you don't need to track any of that right now. You can let it all be, happening somewhere out there while you rest. Your own light, your consciousness, your awareness can dim now, fading into sleep the way bioluminescent light fades when the chemical reaction slows or stops. There's no abruptness to it, just a gradual decrease in brightness, a gentle transition from waking awareness to sleep. The chemistry that allows your thoughts to occur can settle into quieter patterns. The neural activity that keeps you conscious can ease into the different rhythms of sleep. Take a slow, deep breath in, imagining that breath as a soft blue-green glow, the colour that travels best through water, the colour of calm ocean light. Hold it for a moment at the top, just briefly. Then let it out slowly, watching that imaginary glow dim and fade as the air leaves your lungs. Again, breathe in, a soft glow rising, and out, the light fading. Each breath is a gentle pulse, like a jellyfish in the dark, like a dinoflagellate flashing and then going dark, like a firefly's slow blink on a summer night. The facts about bioluminescence, about luciferin and luciferase, about counter-illumination and symbiotic bacteria, about deep-sea anglerfish and glowing plankton, these can all settle into memory now, not as things to remember actively, but as part of the general knowledge that fills your mind. They join all the other gentle information you've gathered, adding to your understanding of the world without requiring any effort or attention. And in this moment, in the darkness of your room, in the quiet of late evening or night, you're like one of those bioluminescent organisms in a way, a point of consciousness in the vast darkness of the universe, glowing softly with awareness, but ready now to dim that light and rest. The light will return when it's needed, when morning comes or when you wake. For now, though, it can fade. Let your thoughts grow dimmer, like light organs shutting down for the night, like fireflies ceasing their flashing, like plankton going still in calm water. Let the steady rhythm of your breathing be the only thing you notice, and even that can fade into the background, becoming automatic and unnoticed, the way most of our breathing always is. You are safe, you are comfortable, and you are ready for sleep. The world will keep turning, bioluminescence will keep happening in oceans and forests and fields, but you can let all of that be. You've learned about it, considered it, appreciated it, and now you can release it and rest. Take one more deep breath in, feeling the air fill your lungs, imagining a soft glow rising with it, and then let it out, long and slow, feeling everything relax as the air and the imaginary light fade away together. Your body is heavy and still, your mind is quiet and dim, the gentle darkness around you and inside you is peaceful, not frightening, just the natural state of rest, the background against which sleep's own kind of awareness will soon emerge. Let yourself drift now, like a bioluminescent organism sinking slowly through dark water, light dimming, becoming just another part of the quiet darkness. Down through layers of near sleep, through the twilight zone of drowsiness, into the deeper darkness of true sleep. No effort is needed, no thought is required, just release and rest, and let the soft darkness hold you as you fade into sleep, gently, completely, surrounded by the peaceful knowledge that light exists when it's needed, but darkness is where rest happens. Sleep now, softly glowing in your own way, then dimming, then dark, then deeply, peacefully asleep. The next story is about to begin. Please relax and enjoy. Dinosaurs were a diverse group of reptiles that lived during the Mesozoic era. A span of time so vast it can be hard to imagine at first, but tonight we can let it settle in slowly, like watching clouds drift across a still sky. The Mesozoic era is divided into three main periods, each with its own character and pace: the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous. These names might sound grand, but they simply mark chapters in Earth's long, quiet calendar, stretching across more than 180 million years. During all that time, dinosaurs walked on land, their feet pressing into mud that would sometimes harden into stone, preserving their steps for us to find much, much later. While dinosaurs lived on land, many other reptiles swam in the ancient oceans, but these ocean-dwelling creatures belonged to different groups entirely. Ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and mosasaurs were not dinosaurs. Even though they lived at the same time and shared the same world, they were relatives in the broader family tree of life, but they evolved along separate branches, adapting to life in the water while dinosaurs remained creatures of forests, plains, and riverbanks. It's a gentle reminder that the ancient world was full of variety, each group finding its own way to exist, its own rhythm of breathing and moving and simply being. Not all ancient flying animals were dinosaurs either. Pterosaurs, those remarkable winged reptiles that soared above Mesozoic landscapes, were close relatives of dinosaurs, but they too were a separate group. They had wings made of skin stretched across elongated finger bones, and they glided and flapped through skies that held different patterns of clouds and winds than we see today. When we picture the Mesozoic world, it helps to imagine it as a place of many overlapping communities, each one going about its life without needing to be at the centre of every story. The pterosaurs had their own lives in the air the marine reptiles had, theirs in the sea, and the dinosaurs had theirs on solid ground, and all of these lives unfolded simultaneously, quietly, across the turning of countless days and nights. Dinosaurs came in many sizes, and this variety is one of the most peaceful things to contemplate about them. Some were small and quick, no larger than a chicken, moving through underbrush with light, rapid steps. Others were enormous and slow-moving, their great weight supported by pillar-like legs, their movements deliberate and measured, like the swaying of tall trees in a gentle breeze. The smallest dinosaurs might have darted after insects or seeds, while the largest ones reached up into high canopies to strip leaves from branches, their long necks swaying with a kind of patient grace. This range of sizes meant that dinosaurs filled many different roles in their ecosystems, from tiny hunters to towering herbivores, each one adapted to its own niche, its own way of finding food and shelter and comfort. Dinosaurs likely had active lifestyles, supported by efficient lungs and strong legs that could carry them across great distances when needed. Scientists have found evidence in the structure of dinosaur bones and the pathways for air sacs in their skeletons that suggest some dinosaurs had respiratory systems somewhat like those of modern birds, which are remarkably efficient at extracting oxygen from the air. This doesn't mean dinosaurs were constantly running or leaping. It simply means their bodies were built to support steady activity, whether that was walking all day in search of food, or moving between water sources, or simply standing and chewing for hours at a time. Activity can be calm, after all. It can be the steady rhythm of one foot in front of the other, repeated over and over until the sun begins to set. Dinosaurs were not all scaly in the same way we might imagine when we first picture them. Some had feathers or feather-like coverings, especially among the smaller, theropods, the group that includes famous names like Velociraptor and Tyrannosaurus. These feathers might have been simple and hair-like, or they might have been more complex, with barbs and veins like the feathers of modern birds. Feathers likely served many purposes. They could help regulate body temperature, keeping a dinosaur warm during cool nights or cool during hot days. They could be used for display, with bright colours or patterns that helped individuals recognise each other or attract mates. And in some lineages, they eventually became adapted for flight. The presence of feathers adds a softness to our mental image of dinosaurs, a texture that feels gentler than the cold, hard scales we might have imagined before. Birds are considered living descendants of a group of dinosaurs called theropods, which means that in a very real sense, dinosaurs never fully went extinct. When you see a sparrow hopping along a sidewalk or hear a crow calling from a tree branch, you are seeing and hearing the legacy of those ancient animals carried forward through millions of years of evolution. This connection is one of the most comforting facts in all of paleontology, because it means the past is not entirely lost. It is still here with us, in every flap of a wing, every laying of an egg, every bird song at dawn. The features that make birds successful today, hollow bones, efficient lungs, feathers, beaks, were all present in some form in their dinosaur ancestors, refined and adapted over countless generations. The word dinosaur means terrible lizard, a name given to them when they were first discovered and scientists were trying to make sense of these enormous unfamiliar bones. But the word terrible here was meant to convey awe and grandeur, not fear. It's an old-fashioned kind of word, meant to suggest something impressive and mighty. Many dinosaurs were likely peaceful in everyday life, going about their routines without drama or violence. They would have spent their time eating, resting, drinking, staying comfortable, just like any other animal. The name might sound dramatic, but the reality of dinosaur life was probably far more ordinary, filled with quiet moments that left no trace in the fossil record. A yawn, a stretch, a slow blink in the warm afternoon sun. Most dinosaur time was ordinary time, and that's worth dwelling on for a moment as we settle into this gentle exploration. Walking, eating, resting, and repeating calm routines. This was the substance of a dinosaur's life. Days would pass in familiar patterns, shaped by the position of the sun, the availability of food, the presence of water. There would be some days that were different, of course. A day when a storm rolled through, or when it was time to move to a new feeding area, or when eggs needed to be laid and tended. But most days were simply more of the same, a continuation of the rhythms that had sustained their ancestors for generations. This ordinariness is not a disappointment. It's actually one of the most soothing things we can know about the past. Deep time was not filled with constant drama. It was filled with normal life, and normal life is a foundation we can rest upon. Now that the word dinosaur feels gentle and clear, we can drift into deep time itself, opening our understanding like a quiet calendar made of rock. Dinosaurs lived for over 160 million years, a span so long it's difficult to hold in our minds all at once. To put it in perspective, humans and our close ancestors have existed for only a few million years, and modern human civilization, everything we think of as history, all the cities and empires and discoveries, has unfolded over just a few thousand years. Dinosaurs lived through a stretch of time that is more than 1,000 times longer than all of recorded human history. This vastness can feel overwhelming if we approach it too quickly, but if we let it settle slowly, it becomes something peaceful, like looking up at the stars and feeling connected to something much larger than ourselves. The continents were arranged differently during dinosaur times, and they shifted slowly over the ages in a process called plate tectonics. Plate tectonics is the movement of Earth's outer shell, which is broken into large pieces called tectonic plates that float on the semi-molten rock beneath them. These plates move at rates similar to the growth of your fingernails, just a few centimetres per year. But over millions of years, that movement adds up. Continents that are separated by vast oceans today were once connected, forming supercontinents where dinosaurs could walk from one region to another without ever encountering a sea. During the early part of the Mesozoic, most of the land masses were joined together in a supercontinent called Pangaea, which means all Earth. As the Mesozoic progressed, Pangaea began to break apart, slowly splitting into the continents we recognise today. This breakup was not a violent shattering, but a gradual drifting, so slow that no individual dinosaur would have noticed it happening in its lifetime. Many dinosaur habitats were warmer than many regions are today, a fact that shapes our understanding of what their world felt like. The poles still existed, of course, and they still experienced seasonal darkness, with the sun disappearing for months at a time during winter. But even in these polar regions, the climate was generally milder than it is today, without the vast ice sheets that now cover Antarctica and much of the Arctic. Fossils of dinosaurs have been found in what are now cold, barren places, suggesting that these areas once supported forests and rivers where dinosaurs could thrive. The warmth of the Mesozoic world was partly due to higher levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which trapped more heat and created a greenhouse effect. This warmer climate meant that plant life could flourish over larger areas, providing abundant food for herbivorous dinosaurs and, in turn, supporting populations of carnivores. Sea levels changed over time, sometimes flooding inland areas with shallow seas that deposited layers of sediment. These shallow seas were not the deep cold oceans we might imagine, but rather warm, sunlit waters that covered low-lying parts of continents. When sea levels were high, coastlines moved far inland, creating vast coastal wetlands and estuaries where both marine and terrestrial life could intermingle. When sea levels dropped, these same areas became dry land again, and rivers carved new channels through the exposed sediments. These fluctuations in sea level were driven by changes in the volume of mid-ocean ridges, by the formation and melting of ice in polar regions, and by the shifting positions of continents. Each rise and fall of the sea left behind layers of rock that tell us about the conditions at the time, and these layers help scientists reconstruct the environments where dinosaurs lived. Forests, river plains, deserts, and coastal wetlands all existed during dinosaur eras, creating a mosaic of habitats that could be as varied as the ecosystems we see on Earth today. In some regions, dense forests of conifers, ferns, and cycads provided shade and shelter. their canopies filtering the sunlight into dappled patterns on the forest floor. In other areas, wide river plains spread out under open skies, with meandering channels that change course with each flood, leaving behind oxbow lakes and fertile floodplains. Deserts existed too, places where water was scarce and only the hardiest plants could survive, and where dinosaurs had to be resourceful in finding food and shade. Coastal wetlands, with their mix of fresh and salt water, were nurseries for fish and invertebrates, and also provided feeding grounds for dinosaurs that could wade into shallow waters. Each of these habitats had its own character, its own rhythms, and dinosaurs, adapted to fit into these rhythms in countless different ways. Plants shaped dinosaur life by providing food, shade, and nesting materials, and they also influenced the structure of entire ecosystems. The kinds of plants that were available determined which herbivorous dinosaurs could thrive in an area, and the abundance of herbivores in turn determined how many carnivores the ecosystem could support. During the Triassic and Jurassic periods, the plant world was dominated by ferns, conifers, cycads, and ginkgos, plants that reproduce using spores or seeds but do not produce flowers. Flowering plants, or angiosperms, appeared during the Cretaceous period and began to spread across the landscape, bringing with them new food sources and new ecological relationships. The evolution of flowering plants is sometimes called one of the most important events in the history of life, because it changed the availability of food and created new opportunities for coevolution between plants and animals. For dinosaurs, this meant new leaves, fruits, and seeds to eat, and for some, it meant adapting to these new food sources in ways that would shape their evolution. The oxygen and carbon dioxide levels in the air varied across the Mesozoic, and these variations had effects on both the climate and the physiology of living things. During some periods, oxygen levels were similar to what they are today, while during others they may have been slightly higher or lower. Higher oxygen levels could have made it easier for large animals to breathe and move, because each breath would deliver more oxygen to the body. Carbon dioxide levels, as mentioned earlier, influenced the climate by trapping heat in the atmosphere, but they also affected plant growth directly, because plants use carbon dioxide during photosynthesis to build their tissues. When carbon dioxide levels were high, plants could grow more vigorously, which in turn supported larger populations of herbivores. These atmospheric changes were slow, unfolding over millions of years, and they remind us that even the air itself has a history, a story of gradual shifts and balances. Deep time can feel huge when we think about it in the abstract, but it moved one quiet day at a time, just like tonight. Each sunrise that a dinosaur witnessed was followed by a sunset, just as ours is. Each season that passed brought changes in temperature, in rainfall, in the kinds of food that were available, but these changes happened within a framework of familiarity. A dinosaur living in a temperate region would know the feel of spring rains and autumn cooling, would know which plants sprouted first after the wet season and which lasted longest into the dry. Time is made of moments, and even 160 million years is nothing more than a vast accumulation of individual moments, each one as simple and immediate as the one you're experiencing right now, lying here, breathing slowly, letting the information settle, with the world set softly in place. Let's step into a dinosaur's earliest chapter, the time of hatching and growing, when life begins small and vulnerable, and unfolds in patient stages. Many dinosaurs laid eggs, like most reptiles and birds today, and these eggs were carefully deposited in nests that varied widely in design depending on the species. Some nests were simple scrapes in the ground, while others were more elaborate, with mounds of vegetation that generated heat as the plant material decomposed, providing warmth for the developing embryos inside. Fossil eggs and nests show that some dinosaurs nested in groups, creating what we might call nesting colonies, where many individuals would return to the same area year after year to lay their eggs. These nesting sites were often located near water or in areas with soft sediment that was easy to dig into, and the presence of multiple nests close together suggests a level of social tolerance, a willingness to nest near others rather than seeking complete isolation. Hatchlings likely began life small and vulnerable, needing warmth and steady food to survive their first days and weeks. Emerging from an egg is a momentous transition, from the protected environment inside the shell to the unpredictable world outside, and hatchlings would have faced immediate challenges. They needed to maintain their body temperature, find food, avoid predators, and navigate their surroundings. For some species, There is evidence that parents may have provided care, bringing food to the nest or protecting the young from danger. For others, hatchlings may have been more independent from the start, equipped with instincts that help them find food and shelter on their own. Either way, the early days of life were a time of rapid learning and adjustment, a time when survival depended on finding a rhythm that worked. Growth in many animals happens in stages, and dinosaurs were no different in this regard. They didn't simply grow at a steady rate from hatching to adulthood. Instead, their growth was punctuated by periods of faster and slower development, influenced by factors like food availability, temperature, and health. Some dinosaurs may have grown quickly during early years, putting on size rapidly while conditions were favourable, much like many birds do today. This rapid early growth would help them reach a size where they were less vulnerable to predators and better able to compete for resources. As they approached adulthood, their growth rate would slow, and they would invest more energy into reproduction and maintenance rather than continuing to grow larger. Bone tissue can preserve growth patterns that hint at age and development, and scientists can study these patterns by looking at thin sections of fossilized bone under a microscope. When a bone is sliced very thin and examined, it reveals internal structures that tell a story of how the bone was built up over time. Some dinosaur bones show rings or layers, a bit like tree rings, and these features are called lines of arrested growth, or lags. Each lag represents a time when bone growth slowed down or stopped temporarily, which often happens during seasons when food is scarce or environmental conditions are harsh. By counting these lines, scientists can estimate the age of an individual dinosaur at the time of its death, and by looking at the spacing between lines, they can infer whether growth was rapid or slow during different periods of life. These growth marks can suggest seasons of faster and slower growth, giving us a window into the environmental rhythms that shaped a dinosaur's life. In climates with distinct wet and dry seasons, or warm and cold seasons, growth might speed up when resources were abundant and slow, down when conditions were more challenging. This seasonal pacing of growth is common in many modern animals, and it makes sense that dinosaurs would have experienced it too. The presence of lags also tells us that dinosaurs were subject to the same kinds of environmental pressures that affect animals today, that their lives were shaped by the availability of food and water and warmth, and that they adapted to these pressures in ways that allowed them to survive and reproduce. Young dinosaurs may have had different diets or behaviours than adults, a phenomenon known as ontogenetic niche partitioning. This means that juveniles and adults of the same species might have eaten different foods, or lived in different parts of the habitat, reducing competition between generations and allowing more individuals to coexist in the same area. For example, young tyrannosaurs may have been more agile and pursued smaller, faster prey than the massive adults, which could use their size and power to take down larger animals. Similarly, young sauropods, with their smaller size and different body proportions, may have fed on lower vegetation or in different areas than the towering adults. This division of resources is an elegant solution to the challenge of living in a world with limited food, and it shows that dinosaur communities were structured in complex ways, with each age class finding its own place. Growing up in deep time was still a simple rhythm: eat, rest, learn, repeat. Each day brought opportunities to practice the skills needed for survival, to explore the environment, to interact with other individuals, and to gradually become more capable. There is something deeply comforting in this image of slow, steady growth, of a young dinosaur learning its world step by step without hurry, without the pressure of artificial deadlines. The process of maturation was built into the structure of their lives, woven into the fabric of days and seasons, and it unfolded at its own pace, dictated by biology and environment rather than by any external force. From those quiet beginnings, we can follow the gentle middle of dinosaur life, the everyday routines that likely filled most days and gave structure to existence. Dinosaurs likely spent much of their time moving between food, water, and resting places, creating pathways through their habitats that became familiar through repetition. These movements were not random wanderings but purposeful journeys, shaped by the locations of resources and the needs of the body. In the morning, a dinosaur might wake and begin to feed, taking advantage of the cooler temperatures and the dew on the plants. As the day warmed, it might seek shade and rest, conserving energy during the hottest hours. In the late afternoon or evening, it might feed again, and then find a safe place to sleep as darkness fell. This daily cycle of activity and rest is common across the animal kingdom, and there is no reason to think dinosaurs were any different. Trackways, which are fossilized footprints, show dinosaurs walking along shorelines, riverbanks, and mudflats, their feet pressing into soft sediment that later hardened into stone. These trackways are like frozen moments of movement, capturing the exact placement of each foot, the length of each stride, the direction of travel. Some trackways suggest group movement, like herds travelling together, with multiple sets of footprints running parallel to each other, all heading in the same direction. This evidence of coordinated movement is one of the ways scientists infer social behaviour in dinosaurs, because it shows that individuals were not always solitary, but sometimes travelled in the company of others. The reasons for this group movement could vary. Perhaps they were migrating to a new feeding area, or moving together for safety, or simply tolerating each other's presence because they were all drawn to the same resource. Footprints can show pace and direction, without needing any dramatic story attached to them. A slow, steady pace with evenly spaced footprints suggests calm walking, perhaps while feeding or travelling between resting spots. A faster pace with longer strides might indicate running, but even running doesn't have to imply panic or pursuit. It could simply be an efficient way to cover ground, or a response to a minor disturbance. The beauty of trackways is that they give us direct evidence of behaviour, of actual actions taken by individual dinosaurs, and they do so in a way that is grounded and factual, free from speculation about motives or emotions. We can see that dinosaurs walked, that they sometimes ran, that they sometimes moved together, and these simple observations are enough to build a picture of active, engaged lives. Many dinosaurs probably rested often, especially the largest ones, whose great size made extended activity energetically expensive. A sauropod weighing many tons would need to be strategic about when and how it moved, balancing the need to find food with the need to conserve energy. Resting could involve lying down, or simply standing still in the shade, breathing slowly, letting the body cool and recover. Shade from trees, and the cooling of evening may have shaped daily schedules, creating patterns of activity that aligned with the thermal environment. In hot climates, midday heat can be punishing, and many large animals today are most active during the cooler parts of the day, early morning and late afternoon. Dinosaurs likely followed similar patterns, moving when movement was comfortable and resting when rest made sense. Some dinosaurs may have had regular routes, returning to familiar feeding areas where they knew food could be found. This kind of spatial memory is common in many animals today, and it allows individuals to be efficient in their foraging, minimizing the time and energy spent searching for resources. A herbivore might know that a particular grove of trees produces tender new leaves each spring, or that a certain riverside meadow floods seasonally and then bursts with fresh growth. By returning to these places at the right times, a dinosaur could take advantage of predictable resources, fitting its movements into the rhythms of the landscape. Water sources likely mattered, especially in seasonal climates, where the availability of water could vary greatly between wet and dry periods. Knowing where to find water and when it would be available could make the difference between thriving and struggling. Like modern animals, dinosaurs probably balanced effort with rest, expending energy when necessary, but also recognizing the value of conserving it. This balance is a fundamental aspect of animal behavior, shaped by natural selection to favor individuals who can manage their energy budgets wisely. Animals that exhaust themselves needlessly are at a disadvantage compared to those who pace themselves, who rest when rest is available and act when action is required. For dinosaurs, this meant that most of their time was not spent in high-energy pursuits, but in the lower-key activities that sustain life: eating, digesting, resting, maintaining social bonds, staying comfortable. These are not the activities that capture our imagination when we first think of dinosaurs, but they are the activities that actually fill the hours and days of their lives. In a calm way, dinosaur life was likely full of ordinary moments, more than rare events. The rare events, a fight, a predator attack, a storm, an injury, are the ones that sometimes leave traces in the fossil record, and they are the ones that make for exciting stories. But they were, by definition, rare. The bulk of life was made up of moments that were unremarkable, that passed without incident, that required no heroism or drama. A dinosaur standing quietly in the sun, its body warm, its belly full, experiencing nothing more than the simple fact of being alive. This is a moment that left no trace, but it is also a moment that happened countless times across millions of years for every individual that ever lived. These moments are the foundation of existence, and they deserve to be acknowledged and appreciated for what they are, the quiet substrate upon which everything else rests. As those steady routines settle in, we can look gently at what dinosaurs ate, because meals are one of the quietest parts of any long life. Some dinosaurs were herbivores, meaning they ate plants, and herbivory requires specific adaptations to process plant material, which is often tough and fibrous and takes a long time to digest. Herbivorous dinosaurs had teeth and jaws designed for cropping, grinding, or stripping vegetation, and they had digestive systems capable of breaking down cellulose, the structural component of plant cell walls that makes plants so difficult to digest. Some herbivores, like the sauropods, swallowed stones called gastroliths, which helped grind up plant material in a muscular stomach, much like the gizzard in modern birds. Others relied on fermentation, allowing bacteria in their guts to break down cellulose over a long period of time, which required large, digestive tracts and a lot of patience. Some dinosaurs were carnivores, meaning they ate other animals, and carnivory requires a different set of adaptations. Carnivorous dinosaurs, or theropods, had sharp teeth for slicing meat, strong jaws for biting, and often had clawed hands or feet for grasping or killing prey. Eating meat provides more concentrated nutrition than eating plants, which means carnivores can often get by with less total volume of food, but it also means they have to be effective hunters or scavengers, able to locate and obtain animal prey. Carnivorous behavior in dinosaurs ranged from active pursuit of living prey to scavenging from carcasses, and it's likely that many species did both, taking advantage of whatever opportunities presented themselves. Some dinosaurs may have been omnivores, eating a mix of foods that included both plants and animals. Omnivory is a flexible feeding strategy that allows an animal to take advantage of a wider range of resources, switching between plant and animal foods depending on what's available. Omnivorous dinosaurs might have eaten leaves, fruits, seeds, insects, small vertebrates, eggs, and carrion, opportunistically feeding on whatever was abundant at the time. This dietary flexibility would have been particularly useful in environments where food availability varied seasonally, allowing omnivores to thrive when specialists might struggle. Teeth shape can offer clues about diet, like grinding teeth for plants or sharper teeth for meat. By examining the structure of fossilized teeth, scientists can make inferences about what a dinosaur ate and how it processed its food. Flat, broad teeth with complex surfaces are well suited for grinding tough plant material, while sharp, pointed teeth with serrated edges are effective for slicing through flesh. Some dinosaurs had batteries of teeth, with hundreds of small teeth packed tightly together, constantly being replaced throughout life. This arrangement was ideal for processing large quantities of plant matter, and it shows up in groups like the hadrosaurs, which were highly successful herbivores during the Cretaceous period. Beaks also appear in some dinosaur groups, suggesting different feeding styles that did not rely on teeth at all. Beaks are made of keratin, the same material that makes up fingernails and hair, and they can be very effective tools for cropping vegetation, cracking seeds, or tearing flesh. Many herbivorous dinosaurs, like the ceratopsians, had beaks at the front of their jaws that they used to snip off plant material, which was then processed by teeth further back in the mouth. Beaks are lightweight and grow continuously throughout life, which makes them durable and efficient. In birds, which are descended from dinosaurs, beaks have been adapted for an astonishing variety of diets, and it's likely that beaks in non-avian dinosaurs were similarly versatile. Long necks in some herbivores help them reach broad, feeding zones, allowing them to access food that other animals couldn't reach. Sauropods, with their extremely long necks, could browse on vegetation at a range of heights, from ground level to high in the trees, depending on the angle at which they held their necks. This ability to feed at different levels meant that a single sauropod could exploit resources throughout the vertical structure of its habitat, and it also meant that multiple species of sauropods could coexist in the same area by specializing on different feeding heights. Long necks came with trade-offs, of course. They required strong muscles and sturdy vertebrae to support, and they affected balance and movement. But for herbivores living in environments with abundant tall vegetation, the benefits clearly outweighed the costs. Large bodies can help herbivores process tough plant material with long digestion times, because a large body provides room for a long digestive tract where food can be fermented slowly. Plant Material is difficult to digest because of cellulose, and breaking down cellulose requires either mechanical grinding or microbial fermentation or both. Large herbivores can afford to have low metabolic rates, meaning they don't need to eat as much relative to their body size because their large size helps them retain heat and move efficiently. They can also tolerate long digestion times, allowing food to sit in their guts for days while bacteria break it down. This strategy is seen in many large herbivorous mammals today, like elephants and rhinos, and it likely applied to large herbivorous dinosaurs as well. Fossilized stomach contents are rare, but when found, they can be powerful clues about what a dinosaur was eating at the time of its death. In a few exceptional fossils, the last meal has been preserved inside the body cavity, giving scientists direct evidence of diet. These stomach contents might include fragments of plants, bones of prey animals, fish scales, or other organic material, and they provide a snapshot of feeding behavior that is otherwise difficult to obtain. Each discovery of fossilized stomach contents is celebrated by paleontologists because it offers such clear and unambiguous information, cutting through the uncertainty that often surrounds questions of diet. Coprolites, which are fossilized feces, can also reveal bits of diet in a gentle scientific way. When an animal defecates, it expels the undigested parts of its food, and if these droppings are buried quickly and fossilized, they become coprolites. By studying coprolites, scientists can identify what the animal had eaten by looking for fragments of bone, plant material, shells, or other recognizable remains. Coprolites also contain information about the digestive process itself, showing which parts of the food were broken down and which parts passed through unchanged. There is something wonderfully straightforward about coprolites as a source of information. They are quite literally the waste products of ancient lives, transformed into scientific data by the passage of time. Eating is not a battle, it's a rhythm, one calm meal after another across the seasons. Whether a dinosaur was an herbivore grazing on ferns or a carnivore feeding on a carcass, the act of eating was a necessary, regular part of life, no more dramatic than any other daily activity. Food had to be found, consumed and digested, and then the process would repeat. This rhythm shaped the structure of days and seasons, creating patterns of movement and rest that were predictable and sustainable. There is a quiet beauty in this image of dinosaurs feeding, not as violent predators or desperate prey, but simply as animals going about the business of staying alive bite by bite, day by day. Now we can drift into bodies and movement, exploring how dinosaurs carried themselves through their world with steady, natural engineering. Many dinosaurs had legs positioned under their bodies like birds and mammals, which supports efficient walking and running. This posture, called an erect stance, differs from the sprawling stance of many lizards, whose legs spread more to the side. An erect stance has several advantages. It allows for more efficient locomotion, because the legs act as vertical columns that support the body's weight directly. It reduces the muscular effort needed to hold the body off the ground, and it allows for greater speed and endurance. The evolution of an erect stance was a key innovation in the Archosaur lineage, the group that includes dinosaurs, pterosaurs and crocodilians, and it helped enable the success of dinosaurs as the dominant land animals for much of the Mesozoic. Tail balance helped many dinosaurs stabilize their bodies while walking or running, acting as a counterweight to the head and neck, and helping to keep the center of mass over the hips. In bipedal dinosaurs, those that walked on two legs, the tail was especially important for balance, extending behind the body and preventing the animal from tipping forward. Tails could also be used for communication, for defense, or for stability while turning quickly. In quadrupedal dinosaurs, those that walked on four legs, tails were often long and muscular, and they may have been used to swat at predators or rivals. The tail was not a useless appendage, but an integral part of the body, contributing to posture, movement and behavior in ways that are sometimes subtle but always important. Some dinosaurs had strong hips and thigh bones built for long-distance movement, with robust muscle attachment sites and well-developed joints that could withstand repeated stress. By studying the proportions and structure of limb bones, scientists can infer how a dinosaur moved and how much energy it would have expended during different activities. Long, slender legs suggest a cursorial lifestyle, adapted for running, while shorter, stouter legs suggest a more slow-paced or powerful mode of locomotion. The angle of joints, the shape of the hip socket, and the length of the foot can all provide clues about movement, and these clues help paleontologists reconstruct not just what dinosaurs looked like, but how they move through their environments. The largest dinosaurs likely moved at comfortable, steady speeds most of the time, conserving energy and avoiding unnecessary exertion. When you're an animal that weighs 30 or 40 tons, running is not just difficult, it's risky, because the forces involved in rapid movement can cause injury. Instead, large sauropods probably walked at a measured pace, their great mass swaying gently with each step, their long necks swinging slowly from side to side as they fed. This slow, steady movement is efficient for covering long distances and for maintaining a constant search for food, and it fits with the idea that much of dinosaur life was calm and rhythmic, rather than frantic and chaotic. Bones show attachment points for muscles, hinting at strength and motion, and by mapping these attachment sites, scientists can reconstruct the musculature of extinct animals. Muscles leave marks on bones where they attach, and the size and position of these marks tell us about the size and arrangement of the muscles. By comparing these marks to those in living animals, paleontologists can build models of dinosaur muscles, which in turn allow them to estimate how strong an animal was and what movements it was capable of. This process is part of a field called paleobiomechanics, which uses the principles of physics and engineering to understand how extinct animals functioned. Some dinosaurs had specialized features like armor plates or spikes for protection and display. Ankylosaurs, for example, were covered in bony plates called osteoderms, which formed a protective shell over their backs and sides, and they had clubs on the ends of their tails that could be swung with considerable force. Stegosaurs had large plates along their backs and spikes on their tails, which may have been used for defense, for thermoregulation, or for display. These features were not just passive armor, but active parts of an animal's biology, affecting how it moved, how it interacted with others, and how it responded to threats. Others had crests or horns that may have been used for communication or recognition. Hadrosaurs, also called duck-billed dinosaurs, often had elaborate crests on their heads, and these crests contained nasal passages that may have been used to produce sounds. By blowing air through these passages, a hadrosaur could have generated calls that resonated and carried over long distances, allowing individuals to communicate with each other across their habitat. Horns, like those seen in ceratopsians such as Triceratops, were likely used in combat with rivals, in defense against predators, and perhaps in visual display, helping individuals recognize members of their own species and assess the size and health of potential mates. Feathers in some dinosaurs may have helped with warmth, display, or later, flight in bird lineages. The earliest feathers were probably simple, hair-like structures that provided insulation, helping small dinosaurs maintain a stable body temperature in cool environments. As feathers became more complex, they could be used for display, with colours and patterns that conveyed information about age, sex, or health. Eventually, in some lineages, feathers became adapted for flight, with asymmetrical vanes and strong central shafts that could generate lift and provide aerodynamic control. The evolution of feathers is a beautiful example of how a feature can begin serving one function and then be co-opted for another, changing gradually over millions of years in response to different selective pressures. Bodies are living tools, and dinosaur bodies were shaped by many quiet generations of change. Each feature, each adaptation, each quirk of anatomy is the result of countless individuals living, reproducing, and sometimes failing across deep time. Natural selection does not plan ahead. It simply favours whatever works in the moment, and what works in one environment or one time period may not work in another. The diversity of dinosaur body plans, from the massive sauropods to the swift theropods to the armoured ankylosaurs, reflects the diversity of ways to make a living on land, the many different solutions to the challenges of finding food, avoiding danger, reproducing, and surviving. And each of these solutions was tested and refined over millions of years, generation after generation, in the slow laboratory of evolution. With movement and form in mind, we can step into dinosaur communities, exploring how some may have lived near others in calm social patterns. Some dinosaur trackways suggest groups walking in the same direction at the same time, their footprints running parallel, their paces matched. This is direct evidence of coordinated movement, and it raises the question of why dinosaurs might have moved together. Living in groups can help animals find food more efficiently, because many eyes are better than two at spotting good feeding areas. It can also help with vigilance, because group members can take turns watching for danger while others feed or rest. In predator-prey dynamics, groups can provide safety in numbers, making it harder for a predator to single out an individual, and increasing the chances that someone will spot the predator early and alert the group. Herding does not have to be constant. It can be seasonal or occasional, occurring at certain times of year or in response to particular conditions. Some dinosaurs may have congregated during migration, travelling together to take advantage of seasonal resources and then dispersed once they reached their destination. Others may have formed temporary groups around rich food sources or water holes, tolerating each other's presence because the benefits of access to the resource outweighed the costs of crowding. Still others may have lived in stable groups year-round, developing long-term social bonds and hierarchies. The diversity of possible social structures is vast, and it's likely that different dinosaur species employed different strategies depending on their ecology and environment. Some nesting sites show many eggs in one area, suggesting shared nesting grounds where multiple individuals came together to lay their eggs. These colonial nesting sites, which have been found for several dinosaur species, indicate that at least during the breeding season, some dinosaurs were highly social. Nesting in groups can provide protection for eggs and hatchlings because the presence of many adults may deter predators, and it may also facilitate the sharing of nesting knowledge, with younger or less experienced individuals learning from others. The choice of nesting site, the construction of the nest, and the care provided to eggs and young are all behaviours that can be influenced by social learning, and colonial nesting creates opportunities for such learning to occur. Certain dinosaurs may have cared for young, based on nest structures and fossil evidence near nests. Some nests show signs of being tended, trampled vegetation around the nest, or the presence of adult bones near juvenile bones, in a way that suggests the adult was present when the young were still dependent. Parental care is energetically expensive, requiring adults to invest time and resources into protecting and feeding their offspring, but it can greatly increase the survival rate of young. In species where parental care is present, juveniles can afford to be less developed at hatching, relying on their parents to provide food and protection while they grow. This allows for a different developmental strategy than in species where young must be independent from the start. Communication could have used body posture, colour patterns, crests, and sounds, creating a rich landscape of signals and information exchange. Body posture can convey threat, submission, courtship, or playfulness, and many animals today use subtle shifts in posture to communicate with each other without making a sound. Colour patterns, if visible, can signal species identity, sex, age, or health, and they can change seasonally or in response to social context. Crests and horns, as mentioned earlier, may have been involved in both visual and acoustic communication, and the diversity of these structures in dinosaurs suggests that communication was an important part of their lives. Some dinosaurs had long nasal passages or crests that may have influenced their calls, acting as resonating chambers that amplified or modified sounds. The large hollow crests of hadrosaurs, for example, would have changed the pitch and tone of their vocalizations, creating calls that were distinctive and recognizable. By modeling the airflow through these crests, scientists have been able to estimate what hadrosaurs might have sounded like, and the results suggest deep, resonant calls that could travel long distances. Even without certainty, it's reasonable to imagine quiet signals like modern birds use, soft contact calls that help group members stay in touch, alarm calls that warn of danger, and more elaborate songs or displays used during courtship. Social life can be gentle, simply staying near familiar companions, not always interacting intensely, but just being present, moving together, resting in proximity. In many species, the most common social act is just moving together peacefully, maintaining a comfortable distance from others, coordinating movements without conflict. This kind of low-key sociality is common in herbivores, where individuals benefit from group membership but don't need to cooperate actively on tasks like hunting. The presence of others provides a background of safety and familiarity, a sense that one is not alone, and this can be comforting even without any direct interaction. For dinosaurs living in groups, much of their social life may have been just this: quiet togetherness, unspectacular but sustaining. Now we'll drift through the seasons because deep time still had weather, cycles, and repeating patterns that shaped dinosaur days. Many dinosaur habitats had wet and dry seasons that affected plant growth, with rains arriving at predictable times of year and bringing a flush of new vegetation. During the wet season, rivers would swell, floodplains would fill with water, and plants would grow vigorously, producing leaves, flowers, and fruits in abundance. This was a time of plenty for herbivores, who could feed easily and build up their body condition. During the dry season, water sources would shrink, plant growth would slow, and food would become scarcer. Animals would have to be more strategic, focusing their activity around remaining water sources and feeding on whatever vegetation persisted. Rivers shifted their channels over time, shaping valleys and plains through the slow process of erosion and deposition. A river does not flow in the same path forever. It meanders, cutting into one bank while depositing sediment on the other, gradually shifting its course across the landscape. During floods, rivers can break through their banks and carve new channels, leaving behind oxbow lakes and abandoned meanders. These processes create a dynamic landscape where the exact position of the river changes over years and decades, but the overall pattern, river, floodplain, terraces, remains stable over longer timescales. For dinosaurs living near rivers, this dynamism meant that favourite feeding spots might come and go, that new areas would open up while old ones disappeared, and that staying familiar with the landscape required ongoing exploration and learning. Floodplains can preserve fossils because sediments gently bury remains, protecting them from scavengers and from the erosion that would otherwise scatter the bones. When a dinosaur died on or near a floodplain, its body might be covered by silt and sand during the next flood, entombing it in layers that would eventually harden into rock. This rapid burial is one of the key requirements for fossilization, and it explains why so many dinosaur fossils are found in rocks that formed from ancient river and lake sediments. The fossils we find today are the lucky few that were buried in the right place at the right time, under conditions that allowed preservation. Volcanic activity existed in the Mesozoic and sometimes laid down ash layers that now help scientists date rocks. When a volcano erupts, it can send ash high into the atmosphere, and this ash can settle over wide areas, blanketing the landscape in a distinctive layer. Volcanic ash contains minerals that can be dated using radiometric methods, which measure the decay of radioactive elements within the minerals. By finding volcanic ash layers within sedimentary rocks, scientists can determine the age of the rocks, and, by extension, the age of the fossils they contain. This technique has been crucial in building the timeline of dinosaur evolution, allowing researchers to place different species in their correct chronological order. Ash layers can help scientists date rocks using radioactive elements, a process that relies on the predictable decay of unstable atoms over time. Certain elements, like potassium and argon, decay at known rates, and by measuring the ratio of parent-to-daughter isotopes in a sample, scientists can calculate how long ago the rock formed. This gives us absolute dates, measured in millions of years, that anchor the relative sequence of rock layers and fossils. The precision of these dates has improved over time as techniques have refined, and now we can often determine the age of a dinosaur fossil to within a few 100,000 years, which is remarkably precise given the vast timescales involved. Some dinosaurs likely migrated or moved regionally to follow food and water, travelling long distances in response to seasonal changes in resource availability. Migration is common in large herbivores today, who move between wet season and dry season ranges, and there is evidence that some dinosaurs did the same. Trackways showing consistent directional movement, the presence of juveniles and adults together suggesting family groups travelling, and the distribution of fossils across regions that would have had different seasonal climates all point to the possibility of migration. These journeys would have been slow and deliberate, not rushed, with the herd moving at a pace that allowed even the youngest members to keep up. Climate changes over long spans could shift forests into plains or wetlands into dry land, transforming the landscape in ways that required dinosaurs to adapt or move. Over millions of years, the Mesozoic climate underwent shifts driven by changes in atmospheric composition, by the arrangement of continents, and by variations in Earth's orbit. These shifts could turn a lush, forested region into an arid savanna, or raise sea levels and flood coastal plains, creating new wetlands. Dinosaurs living through these changes would not have experienced them as sudden upheavals but as gradual trends, with each generation finding conditions slightly different from the previous one and adapting as needed. Fossil pollen and plant remains help reconstruct ancient ecosystems, providing clues about which plants were present, how abundant they were, and how they were distributed across the landscape. Pollen grains are incredibly durable and can be preserved in sediments, and by analysing pollen from different layers of rock, scientists can track changes in vegetation over time. Plant fossils, leaves, seeds, wood, add additional detail showing the structure of ancient forests and the types of plants that grew together. Together, these lines of evidence allow paleontologists to reconstruct the environments where dinosaurs lived, to understand the food webs that supported them, and to see how ecosystems changed over time. Each dinosaur lived inside a local place, its own familiar landscape, repeated day after day. While we talk about dinosaurs as existing across continents and spanning millions of years, each individual dinosaur experienced only a small slice of that vastness. A particular valley, a specific river, a favoured grove of trees. This local familiarity would have been important, allowing dinosaurs to know where to find food, where to find water, where to rest safely, where to avoid danger. Home ranges would have been learned through experience, passed down through generations in social species, refined through trial and error. The landscape was not a backdrop, but an intimate part of a life, known through direct repeated contact. Seasons are like slow breathing, a return, a drift, and a steady rhythm again. The cycle of wet and dry, warm and cool, abundance and scarcity, repeated year after year, creating a pattern that animals could rely on and adapt to. This cyclical nature of time is comforting in its predictability. Things change, but they also come back around, and this return provides stability even in the midst of change. For a dinosaur, the arrival of the rains each year was both a familiar event and a vital one, marking the transition to a time of easier living, and its cyclical return meant that even during the hardest part of the dry season, relief was always eventually on the way. With the world's quiet cycles in place, we can look at how fossils form, how ordinary moments become gentle evidence across time. Fossils form when remains are buried and protected long enough to be preserved, escaping the many forces that usually destroy dead organisms. When an animal dies, its body is typically consumed by scavengers, decomposed by bacteria, scattered by weather, or otherwise broken down and returned to the cycle of life. But occasionally a body is buried quickly, before these processes can complete their work, and if the conditions are right, the hard parts, bones, teeth, shells, can be preserved. This preservation is not common. It requires a specific set of circumstances, and that's why fossils are rare and precious. Rapid burial in sediment can help prevent decay and scattering, sealing the remains away from oxygen and scavengers. Floodplains, riverbanks, lake bottoms, and coastal areas are all good places for rapid burial, because sediments accumulate quickly in these environments. When a flood occurs, it can deposit several inches or even feet of mud and sand in a matter of hours, covering a carcass completely. Without access to air, many of the bacteria that cause decay cannot function, and the remains can sit undisturbed for thousands or millions of years, slowly being transformed by chemical processes. Over time, minerals can replace organic material, turning bone into stone, through a process called permineralization. Groundwater carrying dissolved minerals seeps through the buried bone, and the minerals precipitate out of the water and fill in the tiny spaces within the bone structure. Gradually, the original bone material may be replaced entirely by minerals, or it may remain as a mixture of original and mineral material. The result is a fossil that retains the shape and structure of the original bone but is now made of rock. This transformation is slow, taking thousands to millions of years, but it is also thorough, preserving details down to the microscopic level. Fossils can include bones, teeth, eggs, footprints, and even skin impressions, each type offering different kinds of information. Bones tell us about body structure, size, growth, and sometimes about injury or disease. Teeth reveal diet and feeding behaviour. Eggs and nests provide evidence of reproduction and parental care. Footprints show movement, behaviour, and social interactions. Skin impressions, though rare, can reveal the texture of the skin, the presence of scales or feathers, and other details that bones alone cannot provide. Each type of fossil is like a different window into the past, showing us a different aspect of ancient life. Most living things never fossilize, which is why fossils are special and rare. The vast majority of animals that have ever lived left no trace in the fossil record. Their remains consumed, scattered, or decomposed without ever being buried. Even when burial occurs, many things can go wrong. The sediment might be eroded away before it hardens into rock. The rock might be melted or crushed by geological forces, or the fossil might be weathered away before anyone finds it. The fossils we have are survivors of all these hazards, representing a tiny fraction of the life that once existed. This rarity makes each fossil valuable, a glimpse into a world that is otherwise lost. Paleontologists study rock layers to understand the age and context of fossils using the principle of superposition, which states that in undisturbed layers of sedimentary rock, the oldest layers are at the bottom and the youngest are at the top. By mapping out these layers and identifying the fossils they contain, scientists can reconstruct the sequence of life through time, seeing which species came before others and how ecosystems changed. The rock layers are like pages in a book, each one recording a chapter in Earth's history, and fossils are the words on those pages. The same species can look different at different ages, so scientists compare many specimens to understand the full range of variation. A juvenile dinosaur can look very different from an adult of the same species, with different body proportions, different bone textures, and different features. By studying growth series, collections of fossils representing different ages of the same species, paleontologists can document how dinosaurs changed as they matured. This helps avoid the mistake of naming different growth stages as separate species, and it provides insight into developmental biology and life history. New discoveries can refine old ideas, and that's a normal, calm part of science. Paleontology is not a finished discipline. It's an ongoing conversation between scientists and the fossil record, with new data constantly being added and old interpretations being revised. A discovery might confirm a hypothesis, or it might overturn it, and either outcome advances our understanding. This process of refinement is not a sign of weakness, but of strength, showing that science is responsive to evidence and willing to change when the evidence demands it. There is something deeply reassuring about this. Knowledge grows slowly, steadily through the collective efforts of many people over many years. Fossils are like quiet notes left in the earth, waiting patiently to be read. They do not announce themselves loudly, they sit in the rock, sometimes for millions of years, until erosion or excavation brings them to the surface where human eyes can find them. The act of finding a fossil is often a matter of luck, being in the right place at the right time, noticing something unusual in the rock, having the knowledge to recognize what you're seeing. Once found, a fossil is carefully extracted, prepared, studied, and eventually displayed or stored in a museum collection where it can be examined by researchers for generations to come. Each fossil is a message from the past, and reading that message requires patience, skill, and care. Learning from fossils is slow work, and that slowness matches the bedtime mood perfectly. There is no rush to understand everything at once. Each fossil is examined carefully, each detail noted and compared to other fossils, each interpretation tested against the evidence. This deliberate pace is well suited to the nature of the subject. Deep time does not hurry, and neither should we when we study it. The process of learning becomes part of the experience, a meditative practice of attention and thought, and there is a quiet satisfaction in piecing together the puzzle bit by bit, letting the picture emerge gradually. Now we'll finish by returning to the gentle theme of a dinosaur's ordinary life, bringing together all the threads we've followed and letting them settle into a peaceful conclusion. A dinosaur's life was mostly made of normal days, not constant excitement, and this is worth repeating because it is so easy to forget. The stories we tell about dinosaurs often focus on the dramatic moments, the battles, the disasters, the extinctions, but these moments were the exceptions, not the rule. The rule was waking up, finding food, drinking water, resting in the shade, interacting with companions, avoiding discomfort, and then sleeping again. This cycle repeated day after day, season after season, year after year, and it was within this cycle that life actually happened. Most days likely included walking, feeding, resting, and staying comfortable, with the specifics varying depending on the species and the environment. A large herbivore would spend many hours feeding each day, slowly processing tough plant material and extracting nutrients. A small carnivore might hunt several times, catching insects or small vertebrates, and then rest between hunts to digest. A nesting parent might sit on eggs for hours, only occasionally getting up to feed or drink. A juvenile might play, practicing the movements and skills it would need as an adult. All of these activities are ordinary, even mundane, but they are also the substance of life. the things that matter on a day-to-day basis. Deep time can feel heavy in daytime when we're trying to hold it in our active minds, when we're trying to comprehend its vastness with our full attention. But at night, when our thinking slows and our defences soften, deep time can feel like a soft horizon, something distant and gentle, not threatening but expansive. The millions of years become less a weight to carry and more a backdrop to rest against, a reminder that the universe is larger than our immediate concerns, that life has persisted through unimaginable spans of time, and that we are part of that ongoing story. The past is not a threat, it's simply a quiet part of Earth's long story, and it has no power over this present moment except what we give it. The dinosaurs are gone, and they have been gone for 66 million years, but their absence does not diminish the value of learning about them or imagining them. They once walked under the same sun that warms us today, drank from rivers fed by the same water cycle, breathed air that circulated through the same atmosphere. They were real, their lives mattered to them in the moment, and now they are part of the deep layers of rock that underlie our modern world. This is not sad. It is simply how time works, how life works, how the Earth continues its slow turning. The world has always changed slowly, like a calm tide shaping a shore, wearing down some features and building up others, but never rushing, never forcing. Mountains rise and erode, coastlines advance and retreat, climates warm and cool, species evolve and go extinct, and all of this happens at a pace that is measured in thousands and millions of years. From our brief human perspective, these changes can seem sudden or catastrophic, but from the perspective of deep time, they are gradual adjustments, part of the natural rhythms of a living planet. The world is patient with itself, and we can borrow some of that patience as we lie here, breathing slowly, letting go of urgency. Dinosaurs remind us that life can take many forms and still follow simple rhythms. They were so different from us, different shapes, different sizes, different ways of moving and eating and sensing the world. And yet they also shared fundamental patterns with all living things. They needed food and water, they needed to avoid danger, they needed to reproduce, they needed to rest. These needs shaped their days just as they shape ours, creating rhythms that are recognizable even across vast evolutionary distances. Life is flexible in its details, but consistent in its basics, and this consistency is comforting. The Earth held them, just as it holds you, steady and patient. The same gravity that kept their feet on the ground keeps you resting here in bed. The same atmosphere that filled their lungs fills yours. The same patterns of day and night, of seasons, of growth and rest, that structured their lives structure yours. You're not separate from the Earth, but part of it, held gently by forces that have operated for billions of years and will continue long after you are gone. This is not a lonely thought, but a connected one. You belong here, just as the dinosaurs belonged, just as every living thing belongs. You do not need to imagine every detail to appreciate the calm of the idea. It is enough to know that dinosaurs existed, that they lived full lives in their own way, that they were part of the long story of life on Earth. You don't need to picture every scale or feather, every tooth or claw, every footprint or fossil. You can let the details blur, let the specifics fade, and simply rest in the general knowledge that the past was real, that it was complex, that it was full of moments both ordinary and extraordinary, and that it has left traces we can study and wonder about. Tonight, you can let dinosaur time drift by like warm sunlight across stone, touching everything gently, changing nothing quickly, simply being present in a way that requires no response from you. The Mesozoic era stretches out behind us, vast and quiet, filled with the accumulated moments of millions of years, and it asks nothing of you except perhaps a moment of acknowledgement, a brief recognition that it was, that it mattered, that it is part of the story that leads to here, to now, to you lying in bed, breathing slowly, letting your thoughts settle, and you can rest knowing that deep time is vast, but your moment is safe and small. You exist in the present, in this specific moment, and the present is always small enough to hold, always manageable, always sufficient. The vastness of the past does not threaten the intimacy of now. The millions of years do not erase the importance of this single breath, this single heartbeat, this single moment of rest. You are here, you are safe, You are held by the earth just as surely as any dinosaur was, and you can let go of effort, let go of worry, let go of the need to understand everything, or remember everything, or even stay awake. Take a slow inhale, drawing air into your lungs just as dinosaurs did, using the same basic mechanism of breathing that has sustained life for hundreds of millions of years. And then a longer exhale, letting the air flow out gently, releasing tension, releasing thought, releasing the need to hold on. And let your thoughts settle like soft sand gently resting at the bottom of a quiet sea, coming to rest in the stillness, no longer swirling, no longer stirred by currents of worry or planning or remembering, just settling softly into the quiet space of sleep, where deep time and present time dissolve into each other, where you can drift peacefully, knowing that you are part of something vast and ancient and ongoing, and that right now, in this moment, all you need to do is rest. The next story is about to begin. Please relax and enjoy.